Lioness shook her head immediately. No. No, you're right. Let Lioness Stark die. I just want to be his mother. Good, Ned said. Here is the plan. Arthur and I will ride to Starfall. It's the seat of House Dane, a few days' ride from here. We will procure a ship, a fast one. We will sail it up the coast to King's Landing. And then I go to Robert. I tell him the tragedy. We'll work out the details. Then, I take the ship north. You, Willa, Howland, and the baby will meet us at the coast. We smuggle you aboard. By the time Robert realizes I'm gone, we'll be passing the neck. Lioness smiled, a weak, grateful expression. You've thought of everything. I have to, Ned said. I'm the big brother. He stood up. Howland and Willa will stay here. They will guard you. Arthur and I ride within the hour. Arthur, Lioness mused. He is going with you. He has a sister to see, Ned said, a softness entering his voice. And I a future wife. Dash. The journey to Starfall was a descent from the furnace of the mountains into the paradise of the coast. Ned and Arthur rode in silence for the first few hours, the rhythmic clatter of hooves the only sound in the pass. They were an odd pair, the Lord of Winterfell in his grey wool and the Sword of the Morning in his white cloak, stripped of his brothers but not his purpose. Arthur seemed lighter. The burden of the Mad King was gone. The burden of the prophecy was gone. He was just a man riding home. You love her, Arthur said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Ned looked over. Ashura. My sister, Arthur nodded. She spoke of you. After Harrenhal. She smiled more. Ned felt a flush rise on his neck that had nothing to do with the Dornish Sunday we connected. We danced. You did more than dance, Lord Stark, Arthur said, a ghost of a smirk touching his lips. Ashura is not one for half measures. If she gave you her favor, she gave you her heart. I promised I would return, Ned said, looking at the road ahead. I promised I wouldn't leave her. And then the war came, Arthur sighed. And I went into hiding. She must think us all dead. We'll fix it, Ned said. We're going to fix everything. As they descended toward the coast, the air changed. The dry dust was replaced by the scent of lemons, salt water, and blooming flowers. The Torrentine River rushed to meet the summer sea, its waters remarkably clear and blue. And there, on an island at the mouth of the river, stood Starfall. It was breathtaking. Ned had seen the Red Keep, and he knew Winterfell, but Starfall was something else. It was built of pale stone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. High towers spiraled toward the sky, and the pale stone sword tower, the seat of the family, looked like a beacon guiding ships home. It didn't look like a fortress of war. It looked like a palace of dreams. Home, Arthur breathed. They rode across the causeway that connected the castle to the mainland. The guards on the gatehouse saw them coming. Ned sensed their reaction in the force. Boredom, curiosity, then shock. And then, pure, unadulterated joy. It's him, a guard shouted. Sir Arthur. And Lord Stark. Open the gates. The Sword of the Morning returns. The heavy gates swung open. Arthur rode through, head high, white cloak billowing. Ned followed, feeling the strange sensation of being welcomed in a land that should have been his enemy. The courtyard was bustling. Servants, grooms, and soldiers stopped what they were doing to stare. But there was no fear, no hostility. They smiled. Some cheered. A man descended the steps of the main keep. He was older, with silver hair thinning at the temples and the violet eyes of House Dane. He walked with a cane, but his back was straight. Lord Alaric Dane. The Lord of Starfall. Arthur dismounted. He walked to his father and knelt. Father, Arthur said. Lord Alaric threw his cane aside and hauled his son to his feet, embracing him fiercely. We heard you were dead, Alaric whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They said you fell at the trident. They said the dragons were gone. I was not at the trident, Arthur said, pulling back. I was doing my duty. And now? I am home. Alaric looked past Arthur to Ned. His expression didn't harden. Instead, a warm, knowing smile spread across his face. Lord Stark, Alaric said, opening his arms as if welcoming a long-lost son. We have been waiting for you. Ned dismounted, slightly taken aback by the warmth. Lord Dane. I come in peace. The war is over. Peace is all we have ever wanted, Alaric said, grasping Ned's hand. Ashura said you would come. She never doubted it, not for a moment. Even when the ravens brought dark words, she said, Ned will come. I promised her, Ned said. You did, Alaric agreed. And a Stark keeps his promises. Come inside. You must be weary. Where is she? Ned asked, his eyes scanning the windows of the keep. In the gardens, Alaric said, gesturing towards the sea-facing side of the castle. She waits for you there. Go to her, son. We can talk of wars and kings later. Arthur clapped Ned on the shoulder. Go. The Gardens of Starfall. The gardens were a maze of lemon trees, fountains, and marble benches. The air was perfumed with jasmine and sea salt. It was a place of impossible tranquility. Ned walked the winding paths, his heart hammering against his ribs harder than it had when he faced the mountain. He smoothed his tunic, wishing he had time to bathe, to shave the travel beard, to look less like a barbarian from the north. He felt her. A bright, melancholy light that suddenly flared into blinding hope. He turned a corner. She was standing by the balustrade, looking out over the summer sea. She wore a dress of violet silk that matched her eyes. Her dark hair was loose, blowing in the gentle breeze. Ashura Dane. She looked thinner than he remembered, but the beauty that had captivated him at Harrenhal was undimmed. She turned as his boot scraped on the stone. Ned, she whispered. I promised, Ned said, stepping forward. I promised I'd come back. She let out a sob. She ran to him. Ned caught her. She slammed into him, burying her face in his chest, her arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. He held her tight, lifting her off her feet, burying his face in her hair. She smelled of lemons and rain. You're alive, she cried. You're real. I'm alive, Ned murmured. I'm here. It's over, Ash. It's all over. She pulled back, framing his face with her hands. She looked at him with a hunger that broke his heart. You look tired, she said softly. It was a long ride, Ned smiled. Mama. Chapter 23, The Heir of North. The Gardens of Starfall. The word hung in the air, fragile and heavy as a glass ornament. Mama. Ned turned slowly, the sound of the sea fading into a dull roar in his ears. He looked past Ashura, to the maid standing under the archway of a lemon tree. And the boy in her arms. He was small, sturdy, and wiggling with the boundless energy of a toddler who has places to be and things to break. He wore a simple tunic of white linen, stained with grass at the knees. His hair was a mop of dark brown curls, Stark hair. But it was the eyes that stopped Ned's heart. They weren't the violet of the Danes. They were grey. The stormy, iron grey of Winterfell. The boy looked at Ashura, reaching out with chubby hands. Then, his gaze shifted to the stranger standing next to his mother. He blinked, tilting his head to the side with a solemn curiosity that was painfully familiar. Da-da, the boy babbled, pointing a wet finger at Ned. Man? Da-da. Ned felt the breath leave his lungs in a rush. It wasn't just shock, it was a physical impact, a resonance in the force that vibrated through his very bones. Give him to me, Ashura said to the maid. She took the squirming toddler, settling him on her hip with the practiced ease of a mother. She turned to Ned. There was no fear in her eyes now, only a quiet, defiant pride. She didn't look down, she met his gaze head-on. He was born 8 months after Harrenhal, Ashura said clearly. After the night in your tent. After we danced. Ned stepped closer. His boots felt heavy on the stone path. He looked at the boy, his boy. You didn't tell me, Ned whispered. The letters, you never said. I couldn't, Ashura said. The war started. The roads were closed. And then I heard about your father. And Brandon. I didn't know if you were alive, Ned. I didn't know if the Mad King had taken you too. I protected him the only way I knew how. I kept him here, safe in Starfall. She brushed a curl of hair from the boy's forehead. He is ours, Ned. He is the love we found before the world went dark. Ned reached out. His hand, calloused from the sword and scarred from the war, hovered near the boy's face. The toddler didn't flinch. He grabbed Ned's thumb with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Ba," the boy declared, shaking Ned's hand. "Up. Up. He wants you to hold him," Ashura explained, a warm smile breaking across her face. Ned didn't wait. He reached down, his large hands grasping the boy under the arms. With the strength that had toppled the mountain flowing through him, lifting the sturdy toddler was effortless. He swept Cregan up in a smooth arc, tossing him gently into the air before catching him secure against his chest. Cregan squealed with pure delight, clutching at Ned's tunic. "Hi! Hi!" Ned chuckled, bouncing the boy in his arms, tickling his side until Cregan shrieked with laughter. It was easy. Natural. He won't break, Ashura said softly, watching them with shining eyes. He's a Stark. He's made of tougher stuff than that. The boy settled against his chest, smelling of milk, lemons, and the sea. He was solid, a real, living weight that anchored Ned to the earth. The boy patted Ned's bearded cheek. "Favor." "Yes," Ned choked out, his vision blurring. "Yes. I'm your father." He kissed the boy's forehead. It was warm and soft. "Does he have a name?" Ned asked, looking at Ashura. Ashura shook her head. "I called him my little star." "But a true name?" "No, I waited. I told my father that Eddard Stark would come back. That his father would name him." She looked at him, her violet eyes searching his. "Name him, Ned. Give him his name." Ned looked down at his son. His mind raced. He needed a name that spoke of strength. Of endurance. Of the north. "Cregan," Ned whispered. The boy blinked at him. "Kegan." "Cregan," Ned said firmly, testing the weight of it. "Cregan Stark." Ashura tilted her head. "Cregan?" "The old man of the north. He marched south once to set the realm to rights," Ned said, looking into his son's grey eyes. "He was hard, but he was just. He held the north together when the dragons danced and the world burned. This boy, he will need that strength." Ashura smiled. It was a radiant, beautiful thing. Cregan Stark. It is a strong name. A name for a lord. A name for a Stark, Ned corrected. He shifted Cregan to one arm and took Ashura's hand with the other. "Marry me," Ned said. She squeezed his hand. "Ned, you are the Lord of Winterfell. And you are the lady of my heart," Ned said fiercely. "And the mother of my heir. I will go to Robert. I will ask him to legitimize him. He will sign the paper before the ink is dry if I ask it. Cregan will be a Stark. He will be my heir." He looked her in the eye. "Marry me here. Come north with me. Be the lady of Winterfell." Ashura looked at him. She looked at their son, who was currently chewing on the collar of Ned's tunic. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Ned pulled her in. He kissed her, and for a moment, the gardens of Starfall spun around them. Cregan let out a squeal of delight, squished between his parents, clapping his hands. Ha! Mama! Da! Kiss! Ned broke the kiss, laughing. As if summoned by the joy, heavy footsteps echoed on the stone path. Ned turned. Arthur Dane stood under the archway of the garden entrance. He had changed out of his travel-stained armor into a clean white tunic bearing the falling star of his house. Ashura gasped. She hadn't seen him since tourney of Harrenhal. Arthur, she cried. She didn't wait. She let go of Ned and ran to her brother. Arthur opened his arms, and she slammed into him. He caught her, lifting her slightly off the ground, burying his face in her hair. It was a desperate, fierce embrace of siblings who thought they had lost each other forever. You're alive, Ashura sobbed into his shoulder. I'm here, Ash, Arthur said softly, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here. Lord Stark and I came together. He set her down, keeping his hands on her shoulders, looking her over to make sure she was real. Then, his gaze drifted past her. To Ned. And the boy in his arms. Arthur froze. He looked at the toddler. He looked at the dark hair. The grey eyes. The way the boy sat in Ned's arms as if he belonged there. Arthur looked at Ned. His violet eyes went wide with genuine shock. By the 7, Arthur breathed. Ash. Ned shifted Cregan, who was staring at the newcomer with interest. Arthur. Meet Cregan Stark. Arthur looked from the baby to Ashura, and then back to Ned. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Harrenhal? Arthur asked, his voice stunned. UAND? Yes, Ned said, feeling a bit sheepish under the gaze of Arthur Dane. Arthur walked forward slowly, his gaze fixed on the boy. Wob, the baby shouted, waving a hand. Uncaar fur. Arthur stopped. A slow, wide grin spread across the sword of the morning's face. The tension of the war, the grief for his sworn brothers, the weight of his vows, it all seemed to lighten in the presence of the child. Uncle Arthur, the knight repeated, testing the sound of it. I like that. He reached out and tickled the boy's foot. Cregan kicked him away playfully, laughing. He has the Stark look, Arthur noted. But those are Dane dimples. He's perfect, Ashura said, wiping her eyes and stepping back to Ned's side. You look like a family, Arthur said quietly. A real family. We are, Ned said. I asked her to marry me. She said yes. Arthur clapped his hands together. Then we have a wedding to plan. Father will be pleased. I was worried that I have to duel you again for Ashura's honor. I think we've had enough duels with Danes for one lifetime, Ned quipped. Indeed, a gravelly voice came from the entrance. Lord Alaric Dane limped into the garden, leaning heavily on his cane. His face was stern, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. He had been watching from the shadows. So, the Lord of Starfall rumbled, looking Ned up and down. You finally named the boy. I did, Lord Dane, Ned said respectfully. Cregan Stark. Cregan, Alaric tested the name. Strong. Northern. Good. I was sick of not knowing what to call him. Boy was getting old. He walked over to Ned. He poked Cregan in the belly with a gloved finger. He has the Stark look, Alaric noted. But he has the Dane temper. He threw a bowl of porridge at the maester yesterday because it was too cold. He knows what he wants, Ned smiled. Just like his father, it seems, Alaric said, looking Ned in the eye. You intend to take them north? I do, Ned said. With your permission. I will make Ashura my wife, and Cregan my heir. Alaric sighed. He looked out at the sea, then back at his daughter. He saw the joy radiating off her. The north is cold, Alaric warned. And far. It is, Ned admitted. But it is home. And I will keep them warm. See that you do, Alaric grunted. Lord Dane tapped his cane on the stone. Well? What are we standing around for? The sun is setting, and my grandson has a name. That is cause for a feast. He gestured to the keep. Go. Freshen up. Wash the road off you, Stark. You smell like a horse. My daughter deserves a husband who doesn't smell like a stable. Yes, good father, Ned said. And Arthur, Alaric added, turning to his son. Put that white cloak away for tonight. Tonight, you are a Dane of Starfall. We drink Dornish red, not water. Arthur smiled. As you command, father. Ned watched them go, the old lord and the young knight. He looked down at Cregan, who was now yawning, his head resting on Ned's shoulder. He looked at Ashura, who was leaning into his side. Ready? Ned asked. Ready, Ashura said. They walked back toward the castle, the sound of the sea behind them and the promise of a future ahead. Dash. The Great Hall of Starfall was not like the Great Hall of Winterfell. In Winterfell, the hall was dark stone, drafts, and massive fireplaces. Here, the hall was open to the night air on one side, overlooking the river. Silk tapestries fluttered in the breeze. The tables were laden with fruits Ned couldn't name, peppers that smelled like fire, and fish that had been swimming that morning. Ned sat at the high table, washed, shaved, and dressed in a tunic of purple silk that Ashura had insisted he wear. Cregan sat on his lap, happily banging a silver spoon against the table and shouting commands at a bowl of mashed neeps. Eat, Ned encouraged, guiding a spoonful into the boy's mouth. No. Cregan declared, spitting it out. Meat? He's a wolf, all right, Arthur laughed from across the table. He was drinking wine, his face flushed, looking younger than Ned had ever seen him. Lord Alaric sat at the head of the table, watching the domestic chaos with a satisfied expression. So, Alaric said, cutting a piece of roast duck. The war is over. Robert Baratheon sits the Iron Throne. He does, Ned said, wiping neeps off his tunic. And what of the Targaryens? Alaric asked. The question quieted the table. House Dane had been loyalists. Aerys is dead, Ned said. Rhaegar is dead. Viserys and the Queen are in Dragonstone. I haven't known any news of them since then. Alaric nodded slowly. And Elia? What of the princess? Elia is safe, Ned said firmly. She is in Winterfell. Or she will be soon. I sent her north with a heavy guard. She and her daughter Rhaenys are under my protection. And the boy? Aegon. Dead, Ned lied smoothly. Killed in the sack. Alaric closed his eyes. A tragedy. But at least Elia lives. Dorne will not forget that, Lord Stark. You saved a daughter of Dorne. I did what was right, Ned said. And now? Alaric asked. What happens now? Now we rebuild, Ned said. I go north. I take my wife and my son. We sail in 3 days, Ned said. We have a ship to meet. The Star of the South, Alaric said. It is yours. It will take you to White Harbor. The feast continued late into the night. Musicians played sad, haunting Dornish songs that somehow sounded happy in the warm air. Ned drank more wine than he intended, his head buzzing pleasantly. He looked at Ashura. She was laughing at something Arthur said, her eyes sparkling. She looked alive. He looked at Cregan, who had finally fallen asleep in his lap, clutching the spoon like a weapon. This is it, Ned thought. This is what we fought for. Dash. Ned carried Cregan to the nursery adjoining Ashura's chambers. He laid the boy down in a crib carved from pale wood. Cregan sighed in his sleep, turning onto his side. Ned stood there for a moment, just watching the rise and fall of his son's chest. He felt a presence behind him. Ashura. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. He likes you, she whispered. He likes food on my plate, Ned corrected softly. He likes his father, she said. She turned him around. In the moonlight streaming through the window, she looked ethereal. Stay with me tonight, she said. No more tents. No more letters. Just us. Ned kissed her. Just us. The next morning, Ned woke to the sound of seagulls and the smell of lemons. For a moment, he panicked, reaching for ice. Then he felt the silk sheets, the warmth of the sun, and the soft breathing of the woman beside him. He relaxed. He got up quietly, dressing in his breeches. He walked out onto the balcony. Below, in the training yard, he saw Arthur Dane. The sword of the morning was moving through forms with a practice sword. He moved like water, fluid and unstoppable. He was alone in the yard, practicing the dance he had perfected over a lifetime. Ned watched him for a moment. He knew Arthur carried the weight of his brother's deaths, the secret of the tower, and the fall of his prince. But here, in the sun of his home, he looked at peace. Ned walked back into the room. Ashura was awake, watching him. You're smiling, she noted. I am, Ned said. What are you thinking about? The future, Ned said. He sat on the edge of the bed. We have a lot of work to do, Ash. Winterfell, it's not like this. It's cold. It's hard. The people are grim. I know, she said, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her. But you are there. And Cregan is there. And we'll be together, Ned said. Ashura reached out and took his hand. That's enough for me. Ned kissed her hand. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the red mountains. The war was a memory. Winter was coming. But for now, it was summer. And the wolves were safe. Chapter 24, The Wedding of Star and Wolf. The Twilight Garden. The sun began its descent into the summer sea, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple, gold, and blood orange. It was the kind of sunset that poets wrote songs about, but here, in the heart of Starfall, it felt like the world was holding its breath for what was to come. Eddard Stark stood in his guest chambers, staring at his reflection in a tall Myrish mirror. He didn't recognize himself. Gone was the mud-spattered soldier who had ridden down the King's Road. Gone was the grim warrior who had dismantled the King's Guard at the Tower of Joy. In the mirror stood a lord. He wore a doublet of heavy grey velvet, embroidered with the dire wolf of his house in silver thread, a gift from Lord Alaric, stitched in a single day by a dozen seamstresses working in shifts to ensure the Lord of Winterfell looked the part. He looked noble. But beneath the velvet, he was still the man who had marched through hell to get here. There was a knock at the door. Enter, Ned said. Arthur Dane stepped inside. The Sword of the Morning was dressed not in his King's Guard white, but in the formal lavender and silver of House Dane. He looked less like a weapon today and more like a prince of the torrent. You clean up well, Lord Stark, Arthur noted with a grin. My sister will be pleased. She was worried you might wear chainmail to the wedding. I considered it, Ned admitted, tugging at the high collar. It fits better. Arthur laughed, walking over to adjust the silver clasp of Ned's cloak. Armor is for surviving, Ned. This is for living. There is a difference. He stepped back, inspecting his friend. You are about to marry the most beautiful woman in the Seven Kingdoms, Arthur said. Try to look a little less like you're marching to the executioner's block. I'm not afraid, Ned lied. You are, Arthur countered. I saw you face my brothers at the tower without blinking. You moved like a demon that day. But tonight? Your hands are shaking. Ned looked at his hands. A slight tremor. It's not fear, Ned said softly. It's, awe. A year ago, I was a second son in the Vale. now. I have a son. I have a war behind me. And I have her. You earned it, Arthur said seriously. Now, come. The sun is setting. And the old gods are waiting. Starfall was built on an island in the mouth of the Torrentine, and at the center of that island, sheltered by high walls of pale stone, was the god's wood. It wasn't like the god's wood of Winterfell. There was no snow, no biting wind. The air smelled of jasmine and sea salt. But there, in the center, stood a tree that made Ned's soul ache with familiarity. It wasn't a weirwood, exactly. The bark was silver rather than bone white, and the leaves were a pale, shimmering gold rather than blood red. But the face carved into the trunk was ancient, weathered by 10,000 years of history. The Danes dated back to the Dawn Age, they remembered the old gods, even if they sang to the seven. The garden was filled with the household of Starfall. Servants, knights, cousins, everyone had gathered. Ned walked to the base of the tree. He stood there, feeling the hum of the earth beneath his boots. Music began to play, a harp, soft and melodic. The crowd parted. Lord Alaric Dane walked down the aisle of crushed white shells. He walked slowly, his cane tapping a rhythm on the stones. And on his arm was Ashura. Ned's breath hitched. She wore white silk, imported from Yeti, that shimmered like moonlight. The bodice was embroidered with falling stars and amethyst gems. Her dark hair cascaded down her back in loose waves, crowned with a circlet of winter roses, a nod to the man she was marrying. She looked ethereal. She looked like the maiden herself, stepped out of a song. But her eyes were locked on Ned, and they were warm, human, and full of love. Alaric stopped at the base of the tree. He kissed Ashura on the cheek, whispered something that made her smile, and then placed her hand in Ned's. "She is the star of my house," Alaric said to Ned, his voice gruff with emotion. "Take care of her, Stark." "I will keep her safe," Ned promised. Alaric stepped back. Arthur Dane stepped forward. In wedding of the first men, it fell to the kin to officiate. "Who comes before the old gods?" Arthur asked, his voice carrying clearly through the garden. Ned squeezed Ashura's hand. "I, Eddard of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell. I come to claim a wife." Arthur turned to his sister. "Who comes to be claimed?" "I, Ashura of House Dane," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "I come to take a husband." Arthur looked at them both. "Who gives her?" Lord Alaric spoke from the side. "I, Alaric of House Dane, her father. I give her." "Lady Ashura," Ned said, turning to face her fully. "I bring you the protection of the north. I bring you the shelter of my hearth. I bring you my heart, which has been yours since the first moment I saw you." He reached behind him and unclasped the heavy grey cloak from his shoulders. It was lined with wolf fur, warm and soft, emblazoned with the dire wolf sigil. Ashura turned her back to him, bowing her head slightly. Ned draped the heavy wool over her shoulders. It covered the white silk of the Dane colors, symbolizing her entry into his protection. He fastened the clasp at her throat. "With this cloak, I protect you," Ned vowed. Ashura turned back to him. She reached up and touched his cheek. "With this cloak, I am shielded," she replied. "I, Eddard, take you, Ashura, to be my wife," Ned said, reciting the ancient words. "To be flesh of my flesh. Heart of my heart. Soul of my soul. From this day, until the end of my days. I, Ashura, take you, Eddard, to be my husband," she vowed, tears shining in her violet eyes. "To be flesh of my flesh. Heart of my heart. Soul of my soul. From this day, until the end of my days." Arthur smiled. "Then, in the sight of the old gods, and by the ancient laws of the first men, I declare you man and wife. One flesh. One heart. One soul." He looked at Ned. "You may kiss the bride." Ned didn't hesitate. He took Ashura's face in his hands and kissed her. A cheer went up from the crowd. It wasn't the polite applause of a court wedding, it was a raucous, joyous shout from the Dornish men and women who loved their lady. From the side, a familiar squeal cut through the applause. "Mama! Da!" Ned broke the kiss, laughing. He turned to see a maid holding Cregan. The toddler was clapping his hands, delighted by the noise. "Bring him here," Ned ordered happily. The maid hurried forward. Ned took his son in one arm, keeping his other arm around his wife. "Pack," Ned whispered to Ashura. "Pack," she agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars came out to welcome them. The feast was held in the courtyard, under the open sky. Torches flickered in iron sconces, and long tables groaned under the weight of the food. It was a stark contrast to the feasts Ned was used to. In the north, feasts were solemn affairs of meat and ale. Here, it was a riot of color and spice. Ned sat at the high table with Ashura. Cregan sat between them in a high chair that Lord Alaric had seemingly conjured from the nursery stores, happily smashing a piece of melon. "This is..." Ned started, looking out at the dancing couples. "Different. Better," Ashura teased, sipping her wine. "Warmer," Ned admitted. "And spicier. My tongue is still burning from that soup." "You'll get used to it," she promised. "By the time we leave, you'll be putting chili flakes on your porridge." Lord Alaric tapped his goblet for silence. "Tonight," Alaric said, his voice carrying over the courtyard, "we celebrate not just a marriage, but a return. The sword has returned, and the star has found her sky." He raised his goblet to Ned. "To Lord Stark! To Lord Stark!" the courtyard roared. Ned stood, raising his cup. "To House Dane! For your hospitality! For your honor! And for your daughter! I am the luckiest man in the 7 kingdoms." The feasting continued late into the night. Musicians played sad, haunting Dornish songs that somehow sounded happy in the warm air. Ned drank more wine than he intended, his head buzzing pleasantly. The next morning, the air in the courtyard was brisk with the scent of the sea. A sturdy carriage stood by the main gate, hitched to 4 sand steeds. It was an enclosed wain, large enough to carry a coffin or a wounded woman. Arthur Dane stood by the horses, checking the harness. He wore a simple traveller's cloak over his clothes, hiding the white armour beneath. Ned walked out to meet him. "You're leaving?" "I am," Arthur said, tightening a buckle. "Someone has to go back." "I should go with you," Ned said, though his heart wasn't in it. He looked back at the keep where Ashura and Cregan slept. "No," Arthur said firmly. "You have a wife, Ned. A wife you haven't seen in 2 years. A son you just met. Stay here. Enjoy these few days of peace before the long voyage. Be a husband. Be a father." Ned hesitated. "But Lyanna. I will bring her," Arthur promised. "Howland and Willa are with her. I will take the carriage. We will travel slowly, carefully. By the time we return, she will be strong enough to board the ship." Arthur leaned in closer, lowering his voice so the stable boys wouldn't hear. "I spoke to my father." "What did you tell him?" Ned asked. "The truth he needs to hear," Arthur said. "I told him that Lyanna Stark died at the Tower of Joy. That the fever took her. I told him that you, in your grief, could not bear to return to the place of her death." Arthur adjusted his gloves. "I told him I am going to retrieve her body. I will bring her back here, put her on the ship, and you will take your sister's bones home to Winterfell." Ned nodded slowly. It was a grim cover story, but a necessary one. If Lyanna was dead before she even arrived at Starfall, no one would look for a living woman in the carriage. "And the baby?" Ned asked in a whisper. "Willa will carry him," Arthur said. If anyone asks, he is another bastard of the war. Or simply a child of the servants. We will keep him hidden in the carriage until we are aboard the ship. It's a good plan, Ned admitted. It keeps your hands clean, Arthur said. And it keeps my father from asking too many questions. He is a good man, but he is a lord. If he knew we were harboring Rhaegar's heir, he would fear the wrath of Robert, Ned finished. Exactly. Let him believe we are just honoring the dead. Arthur mounted his destrier. He looked down at Ned. Stay here, Ned. Walk in the gardens. Play with your son. Leave the ghosts to me for a few days. Thank you, Arthur, Ned said, gripping the knight's forearm. For everything. We are brothers now, Arthur smiled. By law and by blood. He signaled the driver. The carriage rattled into motion, crossing the causeway and disappearing into the red hills of the coast. Ned watched until the dust settled. He felt a pang of guilt for staying behind, but beneath it was a profound relief. He turned back to the castle. Ashura was waiting on the balcony, holding Cregan. The boy waved a chubby hand. Da. Ned smiled. He walked back into the keep, leaving the war and the tower behind him for a few precious days. Chapter 25, The Ship of Secrets. 2 weeks later, the dust clouds on the coastal road heralded the return of the carriage. Ned stood on the battlements of Starfall, Cregan in his arms, watching the wheelhouse rumble across the causeway. It moved slowly, the horses plodding with the fatigue of the Red Mountains. Arthur rode beside it. He sat tall in the saddle, his white cloak stained with red dust, but Dawn was strapped to his back, gleaming in the sunlight. He wasn't hiding. He was the sword of the morning, returning from war. He's back, Ned whispered to his son. Your uncle is back. Cregan burbled, reaching for a seagull that was soaring past, uninterested in the politics of knights and kings. Ned walked down to the courtyard. Ashura met him there, her face pale but composed. She knew or thought she knew what was in the carriage. The remains of Lyanna Stark. The carriage stopped. Arthur dismounted. He didn't smile, but he didn't look like a broken man. He looked like a man who had completed a long, hard duty. Lord Stark, Arthur said, nodding to Ned. Then he turned to his sister. Ashura. Arthur, she breathed, relief washing over her. Lord Alaric Dane hobbled down the steps, his cane tapping rhythmically. He looked at the carriage, draped in heavy canvas to protect it from the sun. Is it done? Alaric asked quietly. It is, Arthur said. The tower is empty. The dead are, at peace. Ned stepped forward. He handed Cregan to a nursemaid and placed a hand on Lord Alaric's shoulder. Thank you, good father, Ned said, using the familial term with a weight of gratitude. For the carriage. For the ship. For harboring my family while I finished this grim business. You are kin now, Ned, Alaric said. Starfall helps its own. Will you place her in the September for the night? No, Ned said quickly, his voice tight. The ship is ready. I would prefer to load the cargo now. We sail at dawn. I want to get her home. The crypts of Winterfell are waiting. Alaric nodded understandingly. As you wish. The dead should not be kept waiting. The Star of the South is provisioned. Then we load, Ned said. He signaled to Arthur. They didn't let the household servants touch the carriage. Howland Reed, who had driven the team, hopped down. Together, the three men Ned, Arthur, and Howland guided the carriage down to the docks themselves, citing respect for the noble dead. In reality, they were guarding the living. The next morning, the docks of Starfall were bathed in golden light. The Star of the South bobbed gently in the harbour, a sleek galley with sails dyed violet and silver. Ned stood on the pier, Cregan back in his arms. Ashura stood beside him, holding a travel cloak tied around her shoulders against the sea breeze. She looked back at the castle that had been her home for 20 years. Lord Alaric Dane looked at his family. He looked old today. He was losing his daughter and his grandson to the frozen north. "The north is far," Alaric said, his voice gruff. "It is," Ned agreed. "But the road is open. You will always have a hearth at Winterfell, good father. Come spring, you must visit. Cregan will need to know his mother's land." Alaric looked at Cregan. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched the boy's cheek. "Grow strong, little wolf," Alaric whispered. "And remember where the stars fall." Cregan grabbed his grandfather's finger and shook it. "Ba." Alaric smiled, a sad crinkling of eyes. He turned to Ashura. "Be happy, daughter," he said. "That is all I ask." "I will, father," Ashura promised, kissing his cheek. "I will write every moon." Alaric turned finally to Arthur. "And you," Alaric said. "You leave with them." "I do," Arthur said. He wasn't wearing the white armor today. He wore the lavender of his house, though dawn still hung at his hip. "The King's Guard, it died with Ares. Robert Baratheon has no love for me, and I have no love for him. But I still have people whom I want to guard." "You are always the sword of the morning," Alaric reminded him. "Wherever you go." "I know," Arthur said. "Protect them," Alaric commanded. "Protect my blood." "With my life," Arthur vowed. They embraced a stiff, warrior's hug that spoke volumes. "Go," Alaric said, stepping back. "Before the tide turns." Ned bowed. He led his family up the gangplank. The sailors cast off the lines. The great sails unfurled, catching the wind with a snap like a cracking whip. As the ship pulled away, churning the blue water into white foam, Ned looked back. He saw the lonely figure of Lord Dane standing on the pier, watching them go until he was just a speck against the pale stone of Starfall. Dash! The Star of the South cut through the summer sea. The deck pitched gently, a soothing rhythm that seemed to lull Cregan to sleep almost immediately. Ned stood at the rail, watching the coastline of Dorne recede. Starfall was gone, hidden behind the cliffs. He looked at Arthur. Arthur was leaning against the mast, watching the sailors. He caught Ned's eye and nodded. A sharp, almost imperceptible dip of the chin. "It's time." Ned turned to Ashura. She was sitting on a bench, shielding Cregan from the sun with her shawl. "Ashura," Ned said softly. She looked up. "Yes." "Come with me," Ned said. "Bring Cregan." "Where?" "Below decks," Ned said. There is something you need to see." "Something?" Arthur brought back. Ashura frowned, sensing the change in his tone. It wasn't the voice of her husband, it was the voice of the Lord of Winterfell. "Serious? Guarded? Is something wrong?" she asked, standing up. "Is it the body?" "No," Ned said. "But there are things I haven't told you. Things I couldn't say on land, where walls have ears." He held out his hand. She took it. Arthur pushed off the mast and led the way. They walked past the busy crew, down the narrow stairs into the belly of the ship. The air here was cooler, smelling of tar and timber. Arthur led them past the main cabins, past the galley, to a heavy door at the far end of the passageway. It was the door to the captain's private quarters, which Ned had requisitioned for the coffins. Arthur stopped at the door. He turned to face them. He looked grim. Ned turned to Ashura. He took both her hands in his. "Ashura," Ned said. "I need you to make a vow." Ashura's violet eyes widened. She looked from Ned to Arthur. "A vow? What you are about to see," Ned said, "must never be spoken of. Not to your father. Not to your sisters. Not to a living soul outside of this room. It is treason." It is dangerous. It is the only thing that matters. Ashura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea air. You're frightening me, Ned. I need you to promise, Ned insisted. On Cregan's life. On our love. You will never reveal this secret. Ashura looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her, for their son, for the future. I promise, she whispered. On my life. On Cregan's life. I vow it. Ned nodded. He released her hands. He looked at Arthur. Open it. Arthur unlatched the door and swung it inward. Dash. The cabin was large, lit by lanterns swinging from the beams. It was furnished comfortably, with a wide bed bolted to the floor and thick carpets. There were no coffins. Sitting on the bed, propped up by pillows, was a woman. She was pale, her dark hair braided back, her grey eyes sharp and intelligent. Ashura gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Lyanna. Lyanna Stark smiled weakly. Hello, Ashura. Ashura stumbled forward. She looked at Lyanna as if she were seeing a ghost. But, the carriage, the box. Ned said. Ned lied, Lyanna said softly. Ashura turned to Ned, shock warring with confusion. You said she was dead. You said we were burying her. I had to, Ned said, closing the door and bolting it. To keep her alive. To keep him alive. Ashura looked back at the bed. And then she saw it. In Lyanna's arms, wrapped in a blanket of stark grey wool, was a baby. He was awake, his dark eyes staring up at the swinging lanterns. He had a tuft of dark brown hair. Ashura stared. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in her mind with the force of a thunderclap. The Tower of Joy. The King's Guard. The secrecy. Rhaegar, Ashura whispered. His son, Lyanna confirmed, looking down at the baby. And mine. Ashura sank onto a stool, her legs giving out. She clutched Cregan to her chest as if to protect him from the truth. A Targaryen, Ashura breathed. The heir to the throne. No, Ned said sharply. He stepped into the room, standing between Ashura and the bed. Not a Targaryen. Not an heir. He looked at the baby. His name is Jon, Ned said. Jon Stark. Ashura looked up at her husband. Ned. Robert will start a war. If he finds out. That is why Robert will never find out, Ned said. He knelt in front of her. To the world, Lyanna Stark died of a fever in the mountains of Dorne. I am taking them to Winterfell. That story stands. It never changes. But the baby? Ashura asked, looking at the infant. You can't hide a baby. I won't hide him, Ned said. I will claim him. He took Ashura's hand. He is my bastard, Ned said clearly. That is the lie. He is my son, born of a woman I met during the campaign. His mother died giving birth to him. I am bringing him home to raise him. Ashura blinked. You would dishonor yourself? You would claim a bastard, just weeks after marrying me. To save his life? Yes, Ned said. And to save Lyanna's. And Lyanna. Lyanna is dead, Ned said, his voice hard. The woman in this bed, she is a distant cousin of House Stark. She has agreed to this. Ashura looked at Lyanna. She saw the grief in the other woman's eyes. The sacrifice. Lyanna was giving up her name, her life, her identity, just to keep her son breathing. You would do this? Ashura asked Lyanna. You would watch your brother raise your son as a bastard. I would watch him live, Lyanna whispered fiercely. That is all that matters. And not as a bastard forever, Ned added, his voice filled with determination. When we reach King's Landing, I will go to Robert. I will tell him Lyanna is dead. He looked at his wife. And then I will ask the king to legitimize my children. Cregan and John. Both of them? Ashura asked, stunned. Both, Ned said firmly. Cregan will be Cregan Stark, my true-born heir. And John? John will be John Stark, my younger son. Brothers. Robert would agree to this. Robert owes me, Ned said grimly. He owes me a debt of blood and grief. He will do it to ease his own conscience. And if John is a Stark by royal decree, no one will ever look for a dragon under the wolf's cloak. Ashura looked at the two babies. Cregan, her son, the heir. And John, the secret prince, the brother. They look alike, Ashura noted softly. The dark hair. The eyes. The Stark blood is strong, Lyanna said. Ashura stood up. She walked over to the bed. Can I hold him? Lyanna asked softly, looking at the toddler in Ashura's arms. My nephew. Ashura smiled gently. Of course. She carefully handed Cregan to Lyanna. Lyanna shifted John to one arm and took Cregan in the other. The weight of the two boys settled against her. Cregan looked at Lyanna. He reached out and tugged a loose strand of her dark hair. Lyanna laughed, a bright, clear sound that filled the small cabin. She kissed Cregan's cheek. Hello, Cregan. You are a big wolf, aren't you? Cregan giggled and patted John on the head, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. Baby. Yes, baby, Lyanna cooed, protecting John's head with her hand. This is John. Your brother. Ashura watched them, the dead woman holding the future of House Stark in her arms. The fear in her chest began to ease, replaced by a fierce protectiveness. We are a pack, Ashura said, repeating the words they had shared in Starfall. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Howland Reed stepped out from the shadows of the corner where he had been watching. The ship is secure. The crew are Dane men, loyal to Arthur. They won't talk. And Willa? Ashura asked, looking at the wet nurse who was folding linens. Willa will confirm the story, Arthur said from the door. If anyone asks, she tended the mother who died. She knows the stakes. Ned looked around the room. The conspirators. We sail for King's Landing first, Ned said. I will share news to Robert. I have to get the writ of legitimization for Cregan and John. Then we go home. To Winterfell, Lyanna whispered, hugging Cregan tight. To Winterfell, Ned agreed. Arthur Dane watched them, his hand resting on the pommel of Dawn which he had reclaimed for the journey. He was no longer a king's guard, but he was still a guardian. The sea is calm, Arthur said. It's a good omen. Let's hope it stays that way, Ned said. The Star of the South sailed on, carrying a dead woman, a fake bastard, a secret prince, and the hope of the future into the gathering twilight. Chapter 26, King's Landing. The Blackwater Rush. The Star of the South cut through the murky waters of Blackwater Bay, its violet sails stark against the grey smoke that still lingered over the city. 10 days at sea had been a balm, but seeing King's Landing again felt like reopening a wound. The city smelled of charred timber and raw sewage, a perfume that no amount of sea breeze could mask. Ned stood at the prow, Cregan in his arms. Ashura stood beside him, her face pale but composed. She wore a heavy cloak of northern wool over her Dornish silks, a visual representation of her new allegiance. He looked back. Arthur Dane stood by the mast, Dawn wrapped in oilcloth and strapped to his back. He wore grey, not white, but he still stood like a king's guard. Howland Reed was near him, holding John. The baby was swaddled so tightly only his nose was visible. Ready? Ned asked them. As ready as we'll ever be, Arthur said. The ship docked at the royal wharf. It was chaos. Merchants shouting, sailors cursing, gulls screaming. But as the gangplank lowered, a hush fell over the immediate area. A detachment of gold cloaks, mixed with Baratheon men-at-arms, stood waiting. They had been expecting a ship, but they hadn't been expecting this ship. When they saw the stark dire wolf on Ned's tunic, they straightened. When they saw the face of Arthur Dane they gaped. A runner detached himself from the group and sprinted toward the Red Keep. "Well," Ned said, stepping onto the wood of the dock. "No turning back now." They walked. They didn't take horses. They walked through the mud and the noise, a strange procession of ghosts and new life. Ned led, carrying his heir. Ashura walked beside him, head high. Arthur and Howland followed, guarding the rear and the secret prince. The small folk stared. They pointed. They whispered. "The Wolf Lord. The Sword of the Morning. The Lady of Starfall." By the time they reached the gates of the Red Keep, the reception party was waiting. The gates of the Red Keep. Robert Baratheon stood at the front. He looked better than when Ned had left him. The bandages were gone, though he still favored his left leg. He wore a tunic of black velvet embroidered with the crowned stag. He looked like a king. Until he saw Ned. "Ned!" Robert roared, ignoring decorum and limping forward with open arms. Ned handed Cregan to Ashura and embraced his friend. It was a fierce, crushing hug that smelled of wine and expensive soap. "You're back," Robert said, pulling away and gripping Ned's shoulders. "You're actually back." His eyes darted past Ned. He scanned the group. He saw Ashura. He saw Arthur. He saw Howland. His smile faltered. "Where is she?" Robert asked. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Where is Lyanna?" Ned looked Robert in the eye. This was the moment. The lie that had to hold forever. "She's gone, Robert," Ned said softly. Robert flinched as if struck. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "The fever," Ned lied, his voice heavy with genuine grief for the sister he had lost to secrecy, if not death. "It took her. By the time I reached the tower, she was in the final stages. She was too weak to move. She died in my arms, Robert." Robert stared at him. His face crumbled. The rage, the hope, the vengeance, it all drained out of him, leaving a hollow man. "No," Robert whispered. "No, I killed him. I killed the dragon. It was supposed to fix it." He looked up, his eyes finding Arthur Dane standing stoically behind Ned. The grief vanished, replaced by a sudden, white-hot fury. "You!" Robert screamed. He shoved past Ned, his hand going for the warhammer that hung at his belt. "You kept her there!" Robert roared, advancing on Arthur. "You watched her die. You guarded her cage while that monster raped her." Arthur didn't move. He didn't draw his sword. He stood his ground, calm as a statue. "Robert, stop!" Ned shouted, grabbing Robert's arm. "Let me go, Ned!" Robert snarled, struggling. "I'll kill him. I'll smash his skull like I smashed his prince. He isn't a Kingsguard anymore!" Ned shouted. Robert froze, breathing heavily. "What?" "This one is mine," Ned said firmly. "Arthur Dane has forsworn the White Cloak. He is coming north with me." "North?" Robert spat. "To do what?" "Freeze." "To serve," Ned said. "He is sworn to Princess Rhaenys. He will be her shield in Winterfell." "Lyanna, she forgave him, Robert. Her last words, she told me he was the only one who showed her kindness. He protected her when no one else could." Ned tightened his grip on Robert's arm. "He tried to save her. Do not kill the man who tried to save the woman we both loved." Jonaran stepped forward, placing a hand on Robert's other shoulder. "Let it be, Your Grace," Jon said gently. "We have the Sword of the Morning as an ally, and Sir Barristan as a commander. It is a victory." Robert looked at Arthur. He hated him. He hated everything he represented. But he looked at Ned, and he saw the truth in his friend's eyes. she forgave him? Robert asked, his voice breaking. She did, Ned lied. Robert let out a long, shuddering breath. He released the handle of his hammer. Fine, Robert muttered. Get him out of my sight. If he goes north, he stays north. He looked at Ashura, realizing for the first time who was holding the baby. My lady, Robert said, his voice gruff but polite. You are welcome here. Thank you, Your Grace, Ashura curtsied, holding Cregan close. You look exhausted, Robert said to Ned. And you smell like a boat. Go. Get inside. My servants will show you to the guest chambers. Get washed, get fed. We'll talk in my solar when you're human again. Thank you, Robert, Ned said. The guest chambers. An hour later, Ned stood in a copper tub filled with steaming water, scrubbing the salt and the gilt from his skin. Ashura was in the next room, settling the children. Cregan was napping along with John, worn out by the excitement. Ned leaned his head back. It was working. The lies were holding. He dried off and dressed in fresh clothes, clean linens and a doublet of dark grey wool. He felt like himself again. Ashura walked in. She had changed into a gown of blue velvet, her dark hair brushed and shining. She looked every inch the Lady of Winterfell. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, Ned said. Let's go. The King's Solar. The solar was less formal than the council chamber. It was cluttered with maps, half-finished meals, and jugs of wine. It felt like a bachelor's den that happened to be in a palace. Robert sat in a heavy oak chair, a goblet in his hand. Jonaran sat opposite him. When Ned and Ashura entered, Robert stood up a bit stiffly, his leg still healing, but he smiled. Much better, Robert said. You look less like a drowned rat. I feel less like one, Ned admitted. He guided Ashura forward. Robert, John. You remember Lady Ashura Dane. But I would like to introduce her properly now. This is Lady Ashura Stark. My wife. Jonaran smiled, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes. Congratulations, Ned. A match made at Harrenhal, finally fulfilled. We were wed at Starfall, Ned said. And this, Ned said, taking Cregan from Ashura's arms, is my son. Cregan. Robert looked at the toddler. He saw the dark hair, the grey eyes. He looked at the size of the boy, solid, sturdy, and clearly walking. Robert frowned, doing the mental math. He's not a newborn. No, Ned said quietly. He's a year and a half old. The room went deadly silent. Robert looked from the boy to Ned, and then to Ashura. His eyes widened comically. A year and a half. Robert sputtered. But that means... Harrenhal. Harrenhal, Ned admitted, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. Robert stared for a second longer, and then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was a booming, thunderous sound that shook the dust from the rafters. You! Robert howled, slapping his knee. You bedded the most beautiful woman in the kingdoms in a tent. Jonaran looked equally shocked, though less amused. Ned, you acted dishonorably? Before marriage. We were young, Ned said, standing his ground. You sly dog. Robert wiped a tear from his eye. I thought you were made of ice. And here you were, making airs before I even picked up my hammer. He walked over and looked at Cregan with new respect. Well, he's a Stark, all right. Look at that scowl. Just like his father. He was born out of wedlock, Ned said seriously. By law, he is a Snow. Or a Sand. Details. Robert waved a hand. You married the mother. That counts for something. I have another, Ned said. Robert stopped laughing. Another what? Another son, Ned said. The silence returned, heavier this time. John, Ned said. His mother, She died, giving birth to him during the campaign. Ned said. It was a moment of weakness. The war, the uncertainty. Robert stared at him, slack-jawed. 2? You have 2 bastards. Jonaran looked like he needed to sit down. Ned, this is unlike you. I am a man, John, Ned said stiffly. Not a statue. Gods, Ned, Robert shook his head, looking impressed and bewildered. I thought I was the one leaving bastards all over the 7 kingdoms. You've been busy. I want to legitimize them, Ned said. Legitimize? Jonaran asked sharply. Ned, think. You have a wife. You will have true-born sons. Why complicate the succession with bastards? Cregan is my firstborn, Ned said firmly. He is of my blood and Ashura's. We are married now. I want him to be Cregan Stark, my true heir. And the other one? Robert asked. They are brothers, Ned said. I will not have John grow up with the stain of snow on his name while Cregan is a lord. I want them both to be Starks. Cregan as the heir, John as the younger brother. A shield for the north. He looked at Robert. You are the king. You can do this. A royal decree. Legitimizing both of my sons in one stroke. Robert looked at Ned. He saw the grief in his friend's face, grief for Lyanna, grief for the war. He saw a man trying to put his broken world back together by gathering his blood close. You want them both to be Starks? Robert asked. Truly. I do, Ned said. I promised John's mother I would keep him safe. And I promised Ashura that Cregan would never be looked down upon. Ashura stepped forward, holding Cregan. They will be raised as brothers, Your Grace. In Winterfell. We are a family. Robert looked at the beautiful woman, the sturdy toddler, and his oldest friend. He shrugged. Done. Write the decree, John. I'll sign it. Cregan Stark and John Stark. Hell, if you have any more hiding in the hallway, bring them in, I'll sign for them too. Thank you, Robert, Ned said, the tension leaving his shoulders. Robert poured himself more wine. The happy mood seemed to evaporate as he looked at the maps on the table. I have news too, Robert said, his voice turning sour. John here, he's been busy. Making peace, Jonaran corrected. Making deals, Robert grumbled. He wants me to marry Cersei Lannister. Ned raised an eyebrow. Tywin's daughter. To bind the realm, Jonaran explained. The West is powerful. We need their gold. We need their stability. A marriage alliance secures Tywin's loyalty forever. Ned laughed. He couldn't help it. It was a sharp, dry bark of laughter. Good luck with that, Ned said. Robert frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you are about to stick your head in the lion's mouth, Ned said, shaking his head. Tywin Lannister doesn't have allies, Robert. He has subjects. If you marry his daughter, you invite him into your bed. Into your council. Into your life. I can handle Tywin, Robert said, though he didn't sound convinced. Can you? Ned asked. He sacked your city to impress you. Imagine what he'll do to keep you happy. Robert groaned. I know. I know. I don't want her. I don't want any of it. I don't want to be king, Ned. I never did. He looked around the solar, at the maps and the papers. You pushed me into this chair, Robert accused, pointing a finger at Ned. You and John. Robert has the claim. Robert is the leader. All I wanted was Lyanna. All I want now is a bloody battle. A horse between my legs and a hammer in my hand. Not this. I know, Ned said softly. I know how much you love a battle. And wine. And women. You don't have to tell me that. Robert chuckled, a sad sound. You know me too well, Ned. That's the problem. You're the only one who remembers I'm just a man, not a statue. You're the king now, Ned said. Statues don't bleed. Men do. Chapter 27, The Price of the North. The King's Solar. The door closed behind Ashura, leaving the room feeling suddenly larger and colder. The heavy oak barriers shut out the sounds of the castle, the servants, the guards, the life of the court, leaving only the three architects of the new world in a haze of wine fumes and map dust. Robert Baratheon leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his bulk. He looked at the closed door, a wistful expression on his face. She's a beauty, Ned, Robert said, shaking his head. You lucky frozen bastard. Ashura Dane. The men at Harrenhal would have killed to dance with her, and you, well, you did more than dance. She is my wife, Robert, Ned said, his voice firm but not unkind. And she is the mother of my heir. I expect she will be treated as such. Of course, Robert waved a hand dismissively. I'm just jealous. You have a wife who looks like a star, and I have. He trailed off, his face darkening as he thought of Lyanna, then of the empty space beside him on the throne. I have a crown. Jonaran cleared his throat, steering the conversation back to the realm of the living. The legitimization decrees will be drawn up tonight, Your Grace. Cregan Stark and Jon Stark. Trueborn sons of Winterfell. Good, Ned said. He walked over to the table and poured himself a cup of water. He needed a clear head. The emotional reunion was over, now it was time for the business of ruling. Or rather, the business of ensuring the North didn't starve while the South played its games. There is more, Robert, Ned said, turning to face them. Robert groaned, reaching for his wine. There's always more. Can't we just drink? We won. You won a chair, Ned corrected. Now you have to keep it. And I have to keep my people alive. He placed his hands on the table, leaning over the map of Westeros. His finger traced the vast, white expanse of the North. The North bled for this rebellion, Ned stated. My father burned for it. My brother strangled for it. My bannermen died on the Trident and in the streets of this city for it. We marched south, we fought your battles, and we put you on that throne. I know that, Ned, Robert said, his voice softening. I owe you everything. You know that. Then show it, Ned said. I'm not asking for gold for myself. I'm asking for the North. Name it, Robert said expansively. You want a position on the council? Master of Laws? Hand of the King? Jon is getting old, he might need a nap. Jonaran smiled thinly. I am spry enough yet, Your Grace. I don't want a seat in this city, Ned said, looking around the solar with distaste. I want to go home. But I want to go home with guarantees. He held up a finger. First. Tax exemption. The North has been neglected for years. The winter is coming, and our stores are low because we fed your armies. I want a 10-year exemption from royal taxes for the North. Every copper we generate stays in the North to rebuild our infrastructure and stock our granaries. Jonaran frowned, calculating. 10 years is a long time, Ned. The Crown needs revenue to rebuild King's Landing. The Crown has the gold of the West and the harvest of the Reach, Ned countered. Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell can pay for the city they helped destroy or ignored. The North paid in blood. We will not pay in gold too. Robert slammed his hand on the table. Granted. 10 years. Hell, make it 12 if it shuts Tywin up. 10 is enough, Ned said. He held up a second finger. Second. The gift. Jonaran's eyebrows shot up. The new gift? The land Queen Alice Anne gave to the Night's Watch. It's a wasteland, Ned said bluntly. The Watch hasn't the men to patrol it, let alone farm it. It lies fallow while my people starve. Wildlings raid it with impunity because there's no one to stop them. I want it back. The Night's Watch will never agree, John warned. They are protective of their rights, even as they rot on the wall. They don't have the strength to hold their rights, Ned argued. I will not strip them of support. In fact, I will increase it. If the gift is returned to the lords of the north, the Umbers, the Karstarks, the mountain clans, we can farm it. We can tax it. And a portion of that yield will go directly to Castle Black. Food, wool, timber. They get resources, we get the land. It's a trade. I will go to the wall myself, Ned continued. I will treat with Lord Commander Corgile. All I need is your permission to negotiate the transfer of sovereignty. If the Watch agrees, the Crown agrees. John looked at Robert. It would strengthen the north, and if the Watch gets supplies, they can man the castles again. Do it, Robert said. I never cared for that frozen strip of land anyway. If you can make wheat grow in snow, be my guest. Third, Ned said, pointing to the neck of the map. Moat Cailin. The ruin? Robert asked. The key to the north, Ned corrected. It has been a ruin for too long. I intend to rebuild it. Fully. 20 towers. Curtain walls. A fortress that can stop any army from the south. Jonaran narrowed his eyes. You anticipate an invasion, Ned? From whom? We are your brothers. You are, Ned agreed. But kings die. Alliances fade. And history is a wheel. I want the moat rebuilt and garrisoned. I will give it to a cadet branch of House Stark. Perhaps Benyon, or one of my sons when they come of age. But I need the crown to recognize the charter. Robert waved his hand. Build 100 castles if you like. Who are you keeping out? The Freys. Speaking of the Freys, Ned said, his finger sliding down the map to the crossing of the Green Fork. That brings me to my next point. The bridge. The one you built in 4 days. Robert laughed. The Great Yawn hasn't shut up about it. It's a temporary structure, Ned said. Timber and rope. It won't last more than a few years. I want to build a permanent one. A stone bridge, wide and strong, right where I crossed. Robert's eyes narrowed as he thought of Valder Frey. The late Lord Frey. He arrived at the Trident when the bodies were already cold. He did, Ned agreed. Because he controls the only crossing. He holds the north and the Riverlands hostage every time we need to move men. I want that ended. I want a royal bridge. A bridge that belongs to the crown, free for all to use. No tolls. No negotiations. Robert grinned, a vicious, delighted expression. A free bridge right next to his toll booth? That would ruin him. It would make him irrelevant, Ned corrected. I love it, Robert declared. Do it. Build it high. Call it the King's Crossing just to spite the old weasel. A nice gift for his loyal service in arriving late. Jonaran sighed, the master of coin in him wincing. A stone bridge across the Green Fork is a massive undertaking, Robert. The cost. I have a solution for that too, Ned said, leaning back in his chair. You want to marry Cersei Lannister to bind the West, don't you? It is necessary, John nodded. The Lannisters shit gold, Ned said bluntly. Or so the sayings go. Let's find out. He looked at Robert. If Tywin Lannister wants his daughter to be queen, make him pay for the privilege. Tell him the dowry for Cersei isn't just a wedding feast. It's the cost of the bridge. And the cost of rebuilding King's Landing. Ned grinned, a rare, wolfish expression. Ask for a mountain of dragons, Robert. If he wants the throne in his family line, he will pay it. Even if he grinds his teeth to dust doing it. Robert stared at Ned, then burst out laughing. It was a genuine, belly-shaking roar. Make Tywin pay for the bridge that ruins Frey. Robert gasped, wiping tears from his eyes. Ned, you are evil. I can just see his face. That stoic, golden prick having to open his vaults to buy a crown. He'll pay, Ned said confidently. He's already committed. He can't back out now. Consider it done, Robert said, still chuckling. We'll bleed the lion to feed the realm. Brilliant. And finally, Ned said, his finger moving to the western coast of the north. A fleet. Jonaran sat up straighter. A fleet. The north has no sea power, Ned said. We rely on the Manderleys, but they are on the east coast. The west is open. The Ironborn raid our shores whenever they get bored. I intend to build a western fleet. Shipyards at Flint's Finger or Sea Dragon Point. A fleet is expensive, John noted. And dangerous. A northern fleet could threaten Lannisport. Or protect it, Ned countered. Robert, listen to me. The Ironborn. Balon Greyjoy is sitting on Pike, watching us. He sees a new king, a realm bleeding from civil war. He thinks we are weak. He thinks the dragons are gone and the stags are soft. Ned leaned in, his voice dropping to a warning growl. They have brains the size of peas, but they have ships. They will rebel. Maybe not this year, maybe not next. But they will come for the spoils. When they do, I want to be able to meet them at sea, not chase them through the wolf's wood after they've burned my villages. Robert's eyes lit up. Let them rebel. I'll smash them too. Better to smash them before they land, Ned said. I need timber rights and I need ship rights from the Vale and the Stormlands to teach my men. Will you support this? Robert looked at the map. He imagined the Iron Fleet burning. He liked the image. Build your boats, Ned. Build 1,000 of them. If the squids rise, we'll turn the Iron Islands upside down. Then the North is satisfied, Ned said, stepping back from the table. We will rebuild. We will hold the wall. And we will keep the king's peace. He looked at the two men. They were his family, in blood and in bond. Now, Ned said, changing the subject to the one loose end that had been nagging him. What of the Dragonstone garrison? What of the Queen and Viserys? The mood in the room shifted instantly. The triumphant air evaporated, replaced by a sullen, heavy silence. Robert scowled, staring into his wine cup as if it had offended him. Gone. Gone? Ned asked. Stannis, Robert spat the name. He let them go. He didn't let them go, Jonaran corrected gently. The storm. The storm. Robert roared, slamming his cup down. He had the royal fleet. He had the Red Wine fleet backing him. And he let a pregnant woman and a boy slip through his fingers in a rowboat. The storm destroyed the Targaryen fleet, Jon explained to Ned. It smashed them against the rocks of Dragonstone. But amidst the chaos, Willem Darry smuggled the Queen and the Prince out. They sailed to Bravos. Stannis failed, Robert grumbled. He sat there and let them escape. Stannis took the island, Ned pointed out. He secured the ancestral seat of House Targaryen. That is a victory, Robert. A hollow one, Robert muttered. Without the boy, the war isn't over. Not really. Viserys will grow up. He'll find an army. He'll come back. Then we will fight him then, Ned said. But Stannis did his duty. Duty, Robert mocked. He's always going on about duty. Well, I've given him a new duty. He can rot on that rock. Ned frowned. What do you mean? I named him Lord of Dragonstone, Robert said, looking pleased with himself. It's fitting. He likes rocks. He can sit there and stare at the sea and think about how he lost the last dragons. Ned froze. His internal wiki flashed red. You made him Lord of Dragonstone? Ned asked slowly. Yes, Robert said. And I gave Storm's End to Renly. Renly? Ned asked incredulously. He's a child. He's 6 years old. He's a Baratheon, Robert shrugged. He can grow into it. Stannis is too sour for Storm's End. The Storm Lords don't like him. They need someone lighter. Are you mad? Ned yelled. The shout was so sudden, so loud, that Robert actually flinched. Jonaran jumped in his seat. Ned? Robert asked, confused. Are you out of your mind? Ned demanded, stepping forward, his hands slamming onto the table. Stannis held Storm's End for a year. He ate rats and shoe leather so you could play soldier in the Riverlands. He held the line against the entire might of the Reach. Without him, your home would be a Tyrell garrison right now. I know that. Robert shouted back, defensive now. That's why I'm giving him Dragonstone. It's the seat of the heir. It's a royal castle. It's an honor. It's a rock. Ned roared. It's a dark, damp, volcanic rock in the middle of the sea with a few fishing villages and a lot of ugly statues. Storm's End is his home. It is one of the greatest castles in the realm. It commands the Storm Lands. It has income, levies, power. Ned pointed a shaking finger at Robert. To give Storm's End to a 6-year-old boy who spent the war in safety, and to give Stannis the man who starved for you a bleak island. Robert, that is not an honor. That is an insult. A slap in the face. It's the traditional seat of the Crown Prince. Robert argued, though he looked less certain now. It means he's my heir. Until you have a son. Ned countered. And then what? Then he's just the lord of a rock, while his baby brother holds the ancestral seat that he defended. Do you think Stannis cares about symbolism? He cares about justice. He cares about what is right. Ned took a breath, calming himself, lowering his volume but increasing the intensity. And think about the politics, you fool. Hoster Tully. What about him? We just betrothed Catelyn Tully to Stannis, Ned reminded him. Do you think Hoster Tully wants his daughter to live on a volcanic rock? He agreed to the match because he thought Stannis would be Lord of Storm's End. He wants his grandson to be a Lord Paramount, not the castellan of a glorified outpost. Ned looked at Jonaran. You knew this. Why didn't you stop him? Jon sighed, rubbing his temples. I tried, Ned. But Robert, he was angry about Viserys. He wanted to punish Stannis. I thought perhaps if you spoke to him. You waited for me to be the bad guy, Ned realized. I waited for the only man Robert listens to when he's shouting, Jon corrected. Ned turned back to Robert. The king was sulking, looking like a petulant child who had been told he couldn't eat his sweets. Robert, Ned said gently. Stannis is your brother. He is loyal. He is iron. But iron breaks if you hit it hard enough. Don't break him. Don't turn him against you. You need him. You need him as master of ships who can hold the narrow sea. Give him Dragonstone as a command, yes. But give him Storm's End as his seat. But Renly. Renly can wait, Ned said. Renly can have Dragonstone when he comes of age, if you haven't had a son by then. Or give Renly nothing. He's the third son. He expects nothing. Robert grunted. He picked up his wine cup, swirled the dregs, and downed it. He's going to be insufferable about it, Robert muttered. He'll grind his teeth and tell me how I should have done it sooner. He will, Ned agreed with a smile. But he will be on your side. Wholly and truly. Robert sighed. Fine. Fine. Stannis gets Storm's End. Renly gets. I don't know, a pony. Are you happy now, Stark? I am, Ned said, sitting back down. And Stannis will be too. Even if he never admits it. He won't, Robert chuckled. Miserable bastard. The tension in the room dissipated. The decisions were made. The realm was shaped. So, Robert said, clapping his hands together. Business is done. No more talk of taxes or rocks or ships. Tomorrow, you leave. At dawn, Ned said. Then tonight, Robert declared, we feast. A real feast. Not that sour stuff we had at the coronation. I want boar. I want ale. And I want to celebrate your wedding properly, Ned. You didn't even invite me. It was a small affair, Ned apologized. We'll make up for it, Robert promised. Tonight, the dragon is dead, the wolf is married, and the stag is king. Tonight, we drink until we forget what blood tastes like. The feast in the Great Hall was a raucous affair. The tables were packed with lords from every corner of the 7 kingdoms. The mood was high. The war was over, the harvest was coming in, and the new king was generous with his wine. Ned sat at the high table, Ashura beside him. Cregan was asleep in a basket under the table. Robert was in his element. He was loud, boisterous, hugging serving girls and challenging lords to drinking contests. He looked happy. But Ned saw the cracks. He saw the way Robert's eyes would sometimes drift to the empty space where Lioness should have been. He saw the way he drank not for joy, but to drown the silence. He will never be whole, Ned realized. The crown is a bandage over a wound that won't heal. Jonaran sat on Robert's other side, looking weary but content. He had held the realm together. He had built a coalition out of nothing. And Stannis Baratheon sat at the end of the table. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't smiling. He was cutting his meat with precise, surgical strokes. Ned picked up his cup and walked over to him. Lord Stannis, Ned said. Stannis looked up. His blue eyes were cold, his jaw set. Lord Stark. I wanted to congratulate you, Ned said. On the betrothal. Lady Catelyn is a fine woman. Strong. Dutiful. She brings the Riverlands, Stannis said flatly. It is a necessary alliance. She will make a good lady of Storm's End, Ned added pointedly. Stannis paused. He put down his knife. He looked at Ned, really looked at him. Robert, he intended to give me Dragonstone, Stannis said. It wasn't a question. Stannis knew his brother. He considered it, Ned admitted. He thought it an honor. The seat of the heir. He thought it a punishment, Stannis corrected bitterly. For letting the children escape. Perhaps, Ned said. But he was reminded of your service. Of the siege. Of the fact that you held his home when he could not. Stannis ground his teeth. A muscle in his jaw jumped. You reminded him, Stannis deduced. I merely pointed out the truth, Ned said lightly. Storm's End belongs to you, Stannis. By right and by merit. Hold it well. Stannis stood up. He was a stiff, awkward man, uncomfortable with gratitude. I will, Stannis said. He held out his hand. Thank you, Lord Stark. The next morning, the docks were quiet. The revelry of the night before had left the city hungover and slow. Ned stood on the pier with Robert and Jon. This is it, then, Robert said. He looked terrible, eyes red, face puffy, but he had come to see them off. It is, Ned said. You'll come back? Robert asked. For the tourneys? For the councils. I'll come back, Ned promised. When the snows melt. That could be years, Robert grumbled. Then come north, Ned said. Bring your court to Winterfell. We'll hunt in the Wolf's Wood. It will be like old times. I might just do that, Robert said. Get away from these spiders and bootlickers. He hugged Ned one last time. Be safe, Ned. Give my love to your boy. And the other one? I will, Ned said. He turned to Jonaran. Watch him, John, Ned whispered. I will, John promised. Go home, Ned. You've done your duty. Ned walked up the gangplank. Ashura was waiting for him at the rail, Cregan in her arms. Arthur stood behind her, watching the Red Keep with a guarded expression. The lines were cast off. The ship drifted away from the dock. As the city receded, turning into a smudge of smoke and stone against the sky, Ned felt the weight finally lift. The south was behind him. The war was behind him. Ahead lay the sea. And beyond that, the white knife. And beyond that, winter fell. Ned Stark put his arm around his wife. He looked at his son. He thought of John, sleeping in the cabin below. Take us home, Ned said to the captain. The sails filled with wind. The ship surged forward. The wolf was going home. Chapter 28, Back to North. The docks of King's Landing were loud, smelly, and chaotic, but to Ned Stark, they looked like the gates of heaven. He stood by the gangplank of the Star of the South, watching as the last crates of supplies were loaded. The city loomed behind him, a beast he had wrestled and tamed, but he was done with it. He was done with the heat, the politics, and the smell. Robert Baratheon limped down the pier, flanked by Jonaran and new King's Guard Barristan Selmy leading them in his pristine white cloak. Leaving so soon? Robert asked, clapping a hand on Ned's shoulder. The throne is still warm. It's yours, Robert, Ned said. Try not to break it. Robert snorted. I give it a week before I'm bored and declare war on Essos just to get out of council meetings. Don't joke, Jonaran sighed. We have enough wars. Robert looked at the ship, then back at Ned. He lowered his voice. You're sure about this? Taking the boy? Taking Arthur Dane. Arthur is a good man, Ned said firmly. And the boy, he is my blood. The North protects its own. You're a better man than me, Ned, Robert said, shaking his head. If I had a bastard, I'd probably send him to the wall before letting him near my wife. My wife is Dornish, Ned reminded him with a smile. They have different views on these things. Robert laughed. True enough. Well, go on then. Go freeze your balls off in Winterfell. But send me a raven when the snow melts. I might come up and drink your cellar dry. You're always welcome, Bobby, Ned said. They hugged a brief, fierce embrace of brothers who had survived the fire. Ned turned to Jonaran. Good luck, John, Ned said. You have the hardest job in the kingdom. Running it. John smiled tiredly. Someone has to be the adult in the room. Safe journey, Ned. Ned nodded. He walked up the gangplank, turning one last time. Robert raised a fist in farewell. As the lines were cast off and the ship drifted into the Blackwater rush, Ned let out a breath he felt he had been holding for a year. Finally, he muttered. Dash. Once the city was a smudge on the horizon, Ned went below decks. The cabin was quiet. Ashura was sitting by the window, rocking Cregan. Lyanna was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at a small glass vial in her hands. Arthur Dane stood by the door, watching her. He had shed his grey traveller's cloak and wore simple leathers, Dawn leaning against the wall. Is it done? Lyanna asked without looking up. It is, Ned said, closing the door and bolting it. Robert thinks you are dead. The realm thinks you are dead. We are free. Lyanna looked at the file. Free, she whispered. But hidden. For now, Ned said. Until John is grown. Until the danger passes. Arthur stepped forward. I found it in the Street of Alchemists, he said, nodding to the file. Red dye from Tyrosh. It will stain deep. Red, Lyanna mused. Like a tully. Like a wildling, Ned corrected with a smile. Kissed by fire. Lioness sighed. She uncorked the bottle. The smell of chemicals filled the small room. Help me, she said to Ashura. Ashura handed Cregan to Ned and sat on the bed behind Lioness. She took a comb and began to work the dye through Lioness's dark stark hair. It was a slow, transformative process. Ned watched as his sister's identity was painted over. The dark hair that Rhaegar had loved, the hair that marked her as a wolf of Winterfell, turned a deep, rusty auburn. It suits you, Arthur said quietly. You look fierce. I look like a stranger, Lioness said, looking in a small hand mirror Ashura held up. She touched her new red hair. Who am I now, Ned? If not Lioness Stark. You are Ashura's maid, Ned said. Or a cousin from the mountain clans. We will decide before we dock. But for the journey. You are just a woman coming home. And the mask? Lioness asked, picking up a veil of heavy grey silk. Wear it, Ned said. Tell anyone who asks that you were burned when you were small. Or that you have a pox. People avoid sickness. It will keep prying eyes away. Lioness tied the veil over her face, leaving only her grey eyes visible. The ghost of Winterfell, she whispered. Dash. The journey up the narrow sea was long and uneventful, which was exactly what they needed. The Star of the South was a fast ship, but the winds were fickle. They spent days drifting, the sails slack, the sun beating down on the deck. It was a time of healing. Ned spent hours on the deck with Cregan, teaching the toddler the names of the rigging, the birds, the fish. He practiced his force techniques in secret, moving small objects when no one was looking, expanding his senses into the deep water to feel the fish swimming below. He also spent time with Jon. The baby was quiet, watchful. He didn't cry much. He just stared at the world with those dark, solemn eyes. He knows, Lioness said one evening as they sat on the deck under the stars. She had her veil down, the darkness hiding her face. He knows he's different. He's a baby, Lya, Ned said gently. He knows he's hungry and he knows he's tired. Arthur joined them, sitting on a coil of rope. He looked at the moon reflecting on the water. White Harbor in 2 days, Arthur said. Lord Manderley is expecting us. Wyman Manderley is a good man, Ned said. Loyal. But he talks. We have to be careful. I will be silent, Lioness promised. White Harbor. The Merman's court rose from the mist like a white dream. White Harbor was the only true city in the north, and compared to the stink of King's Landing, it was pristine. The walls were whitewashed, the streets were clean, and the air smelled of cold salt and fish. The Star of the South glided into the harbor, guided by Manderley pilot boats. On the main pier, a welcoming party was assembled. Lord Wyman Manderley stood at the front. He was a massive man, even now, though not yet the mountain of flesh he would become in later years. He wore a teal doublet with a white trident embroidered on the chest. Ned stood at the rail, Ashura beside him. Arthur stood behind them, a silent sentinel. Lyanna, now the veiled woman, stayed back, blending into the shadows of the mast with Willa and the children. The gangplank lowered. Lord Stark! Wyman Manderley boomed, his voice carrying over the water. Welcome home. The North has missed you. Ned walked down the plank, Ashura on his arm. Lord Manderley, Ned greeted, clasping the large man's hand. It is good to breathe northern air again. And who is this? Wyman asked, his eyes twinkling as he looked at Ashura. The rumors were true, then? The wolf caught a star. Lady Ashura Stark, Ned introduced her. My wife. Wyman bowed as low as his girth would allow. My lady. White Harbor is honored. You bring beauty to our cold shores. You are too kind, my lord, Ashura said with a charming smile. Wyman looked past them to Arthur Dane. His eyes widened slightly. He recognized the man. Everyone recognized the sword of the morning, even without the white armor. Sir Arthur? Wyman asked, surprised. He travels with us, Ned said quickly. He has sworn his sword to Rhaenys Targaryen. Wyman looked from Arthur to Ashura. Ah! Noble. Very noble. He didn't ask why a king's guard was alive. He didn't ask why he wasn't with the king. Wyman Manderley was a shrewd man, he knew when not to ask questions. Then, his gaze fell on the veiled woman coming down the plank, carrying a bundle. And the wet nurse beside her, carrying another. And these? Wyman asked. My son, Ned said, gesturing to Cregan in the wet nurse's arms. Cregan Stark. A son. Wyman clapped his hands. A strong name. The North will rejoice. And the other? Wyman pointed to the bundle in the veiled woman's arms. Another son, Ned said, his voice dropping slightly. John. His mother, she died. This woman is her kin. She has sworn to care for him. Wyman's smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly. He was a man of the world. Lords had bastards. It was a fact of life. I see, Wyman said. Well, the wolf's den is large enough for all. Come. We have prepared a feast. Fresh lamprey pie. Oysters. Ale from the brewing vats. Dash. The new castle of White Harbour was warm and welcoming. The Merman's Court was a hall of painted walls and high ceilings, filled with the laughter of Manderley knights and the smell of seafood. Ned sat at the high table, but his mind was on the road ahead. The escort is ready. Ned asked Wyman between courses. 50 lances, Wyman promised, wiping grease from his chin. My son Wei will lead them. They will see you safe to Winterfell. Good, Ned said. We leave at dawn. So soon? Wyman asked, disappointed. Stay a few days. Let Lady Ashura see the city. Winter is coming, my lord, Ned said, using the words of his house as a shield. I have been away too long. Benyon is alone. Ah, yes. The young pup, Wyman chuckled. He has done well, from what I hear. Kept the peace. But the North needs its lord. He leaned in, his voice dropping. There are whispers, my lord. From the dread fort. Roose Bolton, he returned quietly. But men say he watches the roads. He counts the spears. Let him count, Ned said coldly. He saw what we did at the Trident. He knows the strength of Winterfell. Just, be wary, Wyman advised. Dash. The next morning, the Stark procession left White Harbour. It was a strange caravan. 50 Manderley knights in teal and silver. A carriage carrying Ashura, Lyanna, and the children. Ned and Arthur riding at the front. Howland Reed scouting the flanks. They followed the White Knife upstream. The landscape changed slowly. The coastal scrub gave way to rolling hills of green, then to the deep, dark expanse of the Wolf's Wood. The air grew colder with every mile. Lyanna sat in the carriage, the veil lifted now that they were alone on the road. She looked out the window at the passing trees. It smells right, she whispered to Ashura. It smells like pine and snow. It's beautiful, Ashura admitted, pulling her cloak tighter. In a Stark sort of way. That's us, Lyanna smiled. Stark beauty. Ned rode beside Arthur. We'll reach Winterfell in 3 days, Ned said. Arthur looked at the vast, empty wilderness. It is, open. Empty. It's free, Ned said. He reached out with his senses. He could feel the heart tree of Winterfell, miles away. It was a beacon in the Force, a pulsing white light of ancient magic. It was calling him home. Arthur, Ned said. Yes. When we get there, you are the master at arms. If Roderick allows it. But your real job, your real job is John." "I know," Arthur said. "I will teach him. I will watch him." 3 days later, the grey walls of Winterfell rose from the earth. It was evening. Snow was beginning to fall, light flurries that dusted the ground in white. Ned rode through the Hunter's Gate. The guards on the walls blew their horns, a long, deep sound that resonated in Ned's bones. The courtyard was full. Benyon Stark stood on the steps of the great keep. He looked older than when Ned had left him. Taller. More serious. But when he saw Ned, the seriousness vanished. "Ned!" Benyon shouted, running down the steps. Ned dismounted and caught his brother in a hug. "I'm back, Ben," Ned said. "I'm back." Benyon pulled away, looking at the carriage, at the knights, at the white-cloaked, though currently grey-cloaked, figure of Arthur Dane. "You brought an army," Benyon laughed. "I brought a family," Ned corrected. He turned to the carriage. Ashura stepped out, holding Cregan. Then Willa, holding John. And then, the veiled woman. Benyon frowned. "Who?" "Inside," Ned said. "We talk inside." He led them into the great keep. Into the warmth of the fires. When the doors were closed, and the servants dismissed, Ned turned to the veiled woman. "It's safe," Ned said. Lyanna untied the veil. She let it fall. Her red hair was strange, but her face was unmistakable. Benyon stared. He went pale. He looked at Ned, then back at her. "Lya." Benyon whispered. "But, the letter, you said." "I lied," Ned said. Lyanna stepped forward. "I'm here, Benyon. I'm home." Benyon let out a sob and rushed to her. The 3 Stark siblings held each other in the hall of their ancestors, while the snow fell outside. The wolf pack was reunited. And in the corner, Arthur Dane watched, his hand on the pommel of Dawn, guarding the secret that would one day save the world. Chapter 29, The Rat in the Walls. The Crypts of Winterfell. The air in the crypts was always cold, but today it felt heavy enough to crush a man. The stone eyes of the Kings of Winter seemed to watch the procession with silent judgment. Ned walked at the front, carrying the small wooden ossuary box that contained nothing but stones and sand from the Red Mountains. Beside him walked Benyon, his face streaked with tears, looking far too young to be the only other Stark left. Behind them came the household. Ashura, holding Cregan. The wet nurse, Willa, holding John. And at the back, dressed in the simple grey wool of a servant, her face hidden by a veil of mourning, was the woman who was supposed to be in the box. Lyanna Stark walked to her own funeral. Ned stopped before the empty tomb he had ordered prepared. The statue wasn't finished yet, the stonemasons were still carving the likeness of the wolf maid, but the niche was ready. Ned placed the box into the stone sarcophagus. The sound of wood scraping against stone echoed in the silence. It was a heavy moment. Ned felt the grief in the force, Benyon's raw pain, Ashura's empathy, and from Lyanna, a strange, hollow dissonance. She was mourning her own life. The girl who had ridden horses in the Wolf's Wood was dead, buried in this box. The woman standing in the shadows was someone else entirely. "Rest now, Lyanna," Ned said, placing his hand on the cold stone lid. "The winter is done." He turned to Benyon. "We leave her to the kings," Ned said. Benyon nodded, wiping his nose. I want to stay a moment. If that's all right." "Take your time," Ned said gently. He signaled the others to leave. As they walked up the spiral stairs toward the light of the surface, Lyanna brushed past him. Her hand grazed his, a fleeting touch of gratitude and sorrow. Ned watched her go. She would fade into the background now. A ghost in her own home. One problem solved, Ned thought, his face hardening as he stepped out into the courtyard. Now for the others. The Lord Solar. The Solar was warm, heated by the piping system Ned had already begun to inspect and optimize. It was a cluttered room, filled with the debris of a lordship that had been neglected during the war. Ned sat at the heavy weirwood desk. He didn't look at the ledgers. He looked at a blank piece of parchment. He dipped his quill. To Lord Commander Corgile. The Night's Watch has shielded the realms of men for 8,000 years. But a shield needs iron to hold it, and men to wield it. The North remembers. I invite you to Winterfell. We must discuss the wall, the supplies, and the future of the Watch. I have proposals that may interest you. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. He didn't mention the gift. He didn't mention the tax schemes. He just dangled the bait. Corgile was a Dornishman, proud and stubborn, but the Watch was starving. He would come. Maester Whaleys, Ned called out. The door opened instantly. Maester Whaleys had been waiting. The Maester was a small man with a pinched face and eyes that were a shade too watery to be trustworthy. He wore his chain like a badge of office, the links clinking softly as he moved. Ned had never liked him. In his previous life, the life before the rob, he knew the theories. Whaley's flowers. A high tower bastard. The man who had whispered in Rickard Stark's ear about Sauron ambitions. The man who had helped arrange the marriages that tied the wolves to the dragon's game. My lord? Whaleys asked, bowing. You wished to see me? Send this to Castle Black, Ned said, handing him the letter. By Raven. Immediately. Whaleys took the letter. He glanced at the seal, his eyes flicking over the text upside down. He was reading it. The wall? Whaleys asked, his tone smooth. A noble concern, my lord. But surely there are more pressing matters? The harvest? The taxes due to the crown. The crown has granted us a tax exemption, Ned said. For 10 years. Whaleys blinked. 10 years? That is, generous. King Robert is truly a friend to the North. He is, Ned agreed. He leaned back in his chair, studying the Maester. He needed to know. He needed to be sure. Sit, Whaleys, Ned said. The Maester hesitated, then took the chair opposite the desk. My lord. I have been thinking, Ned said, steepling his fingers. About the future. The North is vast, but it is poor. We rely on the South for too much. Grain. Fruit. Glass. It is the way of things, Whaleys shrugged. Winterfell is not Highgarden. No, Ned said. But it could be warmer. He let the silence stretch. I plan to build, Ned said. Not just repairs. Expansion. I intend to construct glass gardens. Not the small ones we have now, but acres of them. Large scale. Heated by the hot springs. We could grow our own wheat in winter. We could grow lemons. We could feed the North without buying a single bushel from the Reach. Ned watched Whaleys' face. The Maester's expression remained polite, attentive. An ambitious plan, Lord Stark, Whaleys said. But the cost? Mere glass is expensive. And the engineering, such structures are fragile under snow. I have designs, Ned lied. From the Citadel's own archives, mostly. Improved trusses. The Citadel? Whaleys asked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Yes, Ned said. But before I commit the gold, I wanted your counsel. You know the Citadel. You know the South. Ned closed his eyes halfway, as if tired. He didn't drill into the man's mind that was Sith work, and dangerous. He just listened. He tuned his perception to the frequency of Whaleys' thoughts. He felt the Maester's aura. It wasn't the clean grey of service. It was a muddy, anxious yellow. Glass gardens? Ned heard the echo of Whaleys' thought, a whisper in the Force. Independence? No. That cannot happen. The north must need the south. The high towers, the Tyrells, they control the food. If Stark grows his own, the leash breaks. The thoughts swirled, faster and clearer as Ned focused. He's dangerous. He's not Ricard. He thinks too much. I must write to Old Town. I must warn Lord Leighton. If the north rises, the balance shifts. We spent 20 years binding them to the faith and the citadel, this cannot stand. Ned opened his eyes. The room felt colder. Whaley's was smiling, a thin, patronizing smile. My lord, while the idea is noble, I fear it is impractical. The gold would be better spent on fortifications. Or perhaps a September. Lady Ashura follows the 7, does she not? A grand September would honor her and bind us closer to the rest of the realm. There it is, Ned thought. The agenda. Build a September, forget the food. Keep us dependent. Keep us pious. Whaley's wasn't just a maester. He was an agent. His loyalty wasn't to Winterfell, it was to the High Tower in Old Town, and by extension, the Tyrells of Highgarden. He was a grey rat chewing on the foundations of House Stark. You make a good point, Ned said, forcing a thoughtful nod. He pushed a wave of calm into the force. A subtle suggestion. Relax. I agree with you. You are smart. I am just a soldier. It was just a fancy, Ned said, waving a hand. A dream from the road. You are right, Whaley's. The cost would be ruinous. And we need to honor the 7 for my wife's sake. He felt the tension leave Whaley's body. The muddy yellow aura smoothed out. Good, the maester thought. He is pliable. I can steer him. I only seek to serve, my lord, Whaley said, bowing his head. I know you do, Ned said. You served my father well. Served him to the fire, Ned thought grimly. Send the letter to the wall, Ned ordered. And then, you are dismissed. At once, my lord. Whaley stood up, clutched the letter, and scuttled out of the room like a roach seeking darkness. Ned waited until the door clicked shut. He stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, obscuring the courtyard below. The stones of the castle were becoming slick with ice. He has to go, Ned whispered to the glass. He couldn't execute him. Executing a maester without proof of treason would alienate the citadel. They would stop sending ravens. They would stop sending healers. The north needed the citadel, for now. But he couldn't let Whaley's live. Not with the secrets Ned was hiding. Not with the plans he had. Whaley's would spy on Jon. He would spy on the glass gardens. He would poison the ears of the bannermen. It had to be an accident. Ned turned from the window. He waited. He felt the maester moving through the castle. Whaley's was ascending the steep, winding steps to the rookery to send the letter to the wall. He would likely stay there to write his own letters to Old Town, letters that would betray Ned's ambitions. Ned sat in his chair, closing his eyes. He didn't need to be there physically. The force connected all things. He visualized the narrow stone staircase leading down from the rookery. It was drafty, the stones worn smooth by centuries of feet. A dangerous place for an old man in heavy robes. Wait. He felt Whaley's finish his task. He felt the maester begin his descent. Step. 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 Whaley's was holding a candle in one hand, clutching the rail with the other. His mind was busy drafting a report to Hightower. He wasn't paying attention to his feet. Ned reached out with the force. He didn't push the man. That would leave bruises. He pushed the step. He visualized a slick of ice on the third step down. Or rather, he visualized the friction vanishing. Whaley's placed his foot. Slip. The maester's boot lost purchase. His weight shifted forward. His hand grabbed for the rail, but his fingers, old and cold, fumbled. Trib. Ned gave a tiny, almost imperceptible tug on the hem of the maester's robe. Whaley's pitched forward. The scream was short, cut off by a sickening series of thuds. Thump. Crack. Thump. The sound of a body tumbling down stone stairs echoed through the quiet tower. Ned opened his eyes. He exhaled slowly. He waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Then, shouting. Help! Someone help! The Maester! Maester Whaleys has fallen! The sounds of running feet. The clamor of the household waking up. Ned stood up. He adjusted his tunic. He walked out of the solar and made his way to the Maester's turret. He didn't rush. He walked with the purposeful stride of a lord investigating a disturbance. A crowd had gathered at the bottom of the stairs. Servants, guards, a few of the household knights. They parted as Ned approached. At the foot of the stairs lay Maester Whaleys. His neck was at a wrong angle. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. The candle had rolled away, guttering out on the stone floor. What happened? Ned demanded, his voice booming in the narrow space. A young steward looked up, pale and shaking. My lord, we heard a fall. He must have slipped. The stairs are steep. Roderick Castle knelt by the body, checking for a pulse. He shook his head. He's gone, my lord. Broken neck. Instant. Ned looked down at the twisted form of the man who had spied on his father and planned to spy on him. A tragedy, Ned said, his voice heavy with solemnity. The stairs are treacherous in the cold. We must have the masons rough the stone tomorrow. He looked around at the faces of his household. They were shocked, sad, but suspicious of nothing. Old men fell. Stairs were dangerous. It was a fact of life in the north. Ned ordered gently. Prepare him for burial. We will send word to the citadel in the morning. My lord, Roderick said. 2 guards lifted the body. The crowd began to disperse, whispering prayers to the 7 and the old gods. Ned watched them go. No one looked at him with suspicion. No one wondered why the Maester had fallen. It was just an accident. A sad, unfortunate accident. Ned turned and walked back toward his solar. The rat in the walls was gone. The secrets were safe. Now, he could build. Chapter 30, The Crystal Hearth. The rookery of Winterfell was cold, open to the biting wind that swept down from the wall. It smelled of feathers, guano, and ink. Ned stood by the window, watching a black speck disappear into the grey sky. The raven carried a letter to the citadel, informing the archmaesters of the tragic, clumsy, and entirely accidental death of Maester Whaleys. A slip, Ned murmured to the wind. A terrible slip. He turned away from the window. The death of the spy was a necessary evil, a pruning of a rotten branch. Now, the tree could grow. But a castle without a maester was a castle blind and deaf. He would need a replacement, and until then, he would have to be his own scholar. Fortunately, he had a library in his head that made the citadel look like a children's book collection. Ned descended the stairs and returned to his solar. He sat at the weirwood desk. It was covered in maps and ledgers, but Ned pushed them aside. He pulled a fresh sheet of parchment and a stick of charcoal. Wiki, search glass manufacturing, pre-industrial. The information scrolled behind his eyes, a waterfall of text and diagrams. Type, crown glass/cylinder glass. Ingredients, silica sand, 70%, soda ash, 15%, lime, 10%, collat, recycled glass. Temperature, 1700 degrees Celsius, melting point. Lowered to 1500 degrees Celsius with flux. Infrastructure, furnace, crucibles, blowpipes, marver, annealing layer. Ned tapped the charcoal against the desk. The north was dark. The north was cold. To feed his people in the winter, he needed sunlight. He needed heat. He needed massive, industrial-scale greenhouses that could withstand a blizzard. The current glass gardens of Winterfell were small, made of thick, cloudy, expensive glass imported from Myr or Tyrosh. They were a luxury. Ned needed them to be a utility. Sand, Ned whispered. Soda. Lime. He began to sketch. Not a sword, or a castle, but a furnace. A beehive-shaped structure with intake vents for air and a raised floor for the crucibles. He drew the tools. Long iron blowpipes with wooden handles. Pontals. Shears. A flat iron table, a marver for rolling the molten glass. Roderick! Ned shouted. Sir Roderick Castle entered the solar, looking weary but alert. The knight had been running the castle guard ragged since the return, ensuring the new guests were secure and the peace was kept. My lord? Roderick asked, his whiskers twitching. I have a mission for you, Roderick, Ned said, standing up and handing him a list. A scavenger hunt. Roderick squinted at the parchment. Sand? Limestone? Seaweed ash? He looked up, confused. My lord, are we building a castle or gardening? We are building the future, Roderick, Ned said grandly. He pointed to the list. The sand must be white. Pure. No dirt, no clay. Look near the banks of the White Knife, upstream where the water runs fast. If not there, send riders to the coast. White sand, Roderick repeated dubiously. Limestone is easy, Ned continued. We have quarries full of it. I want it crushed. Powdered. As for the seaweed, burn it. I want the ash. Specifically, from the kelp that washes up on the eastern shore. It's rich in sodium. Sodium, Roderick tested the word. It meant nothing to him. Just get the ash, Ned said. And coal. Lots of coal. We need a fire hotter than a dragon's breath. Roderick sighed. He had served Rickard Stark, who was stern and predictable. He had served Brandon, who was wild but understandable. Ned. Ned was something else. A quiet man who came back from war with a head full of impossible ideas. I will see it done, my lord, Roderick said. Though the master of the stables will wonder why we are carting sand instead of hay. Let them wonder, Ned said. Go. Next, Ned went to the smithy. Mycon was a man of few words and much iron. He was currently hammering a dent out of a breastplate, the rhythmic clang 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 filling the smoky air. He stopped when Ned entered. My lord, Mycon grunted, wiping soot from his forehead. Ice needs polishing. Ice is fine, Ned said. He laid his sketches on the anvil. I need tools, Mycon. Strange tools. Mycon leaned over the drawings. He frowned. These are pipes, Mycon observed. Hollow iron pipes. 5 feet long. With a flared end. Blowpipes, Ned confirmed. And this? Mycon pointed to a drawing of a large, flat iron table with raised edges. A casting table, Ned said. It needs to be perfectly flat, Mycon. Smooth as a mirror. If there is a pit or a bump, the glass will crack. Mycon looked at Ned as if he had grown a second head. Glass, my lord? You want me to make tools for glass? I'm an armorer. I make steel that kills men, not trinkets. This isn't for trinkets, Ned said, his voice dropping an octave, channeling the Lord's command. This is for survival. This is for bread in the winter. Can you do it, or do I need to find a smith in White Harbor who isn't afraid of a challenge? Mycon bristled. His pride was thicker than his arms. I can make anything that can be made of iron, Mycon growled. But hollow pipes, that's tricky work. Keeping the bore straight. Use a mandrel, Ned suggested, the wiki supplying the technique. Wrap the hot iron around a rod, then hammer the seam weld. Mikan stared at him. A mandrel. That would work. He looked at Ned with new respect. You know the smith's trade, Lord Stark. I know a little about a lot of things, Ned said. I need these in 2 days, Mikan. And the table. Heavy iron. Thick enough to hold heat without warping. 2 days, Mikan muttered, looking at the pile of work already waiting. I'll have to put the lads on the night shift. Pay them double, Ned said. And double for you if the table is flat. Mikan grinned, his teeth white in his blackened face. It'll be flat as a frozen lake, my lord. The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. Ned selected a site for his experiment, a sheltered courtyard near the glass gardens, close to the hot springs. The geothermal heat wouldn't melt the glass, but it would keep the ambient temperature high, preventing the glass from cooling too fast and shattering. Thermal shock. He had masons build the furnace. It was a crude thing compared to the industrial beasts in his memory, but it was solid. Brick lined with clay, fed by a bellows system that Ned had redesigned for higher airflow. Benyon found him there on the second afternoon. The younger Stark was covered in mud from the training yard. You're building an oven? Benyon asked, looking at the dome-shaped structure. Are we baking bread for giants? We're cooking sand, Ben, Ned said, smearing clay over a crack in the brickwork. Cooking sand, Benyon repeated flatly. Right. And Arthur Dane is actually a nursemaid. The world has gone mad. Madness is just genius that hasn't worked yet, Ned said, stepping back to admire the furnace. I need your help tomorrow. You and Roderick. My help? I don't know how to cook sand. I need you to pump the bellows, Ned said. It needs to be rhythmic. Constant. If the temperature drops, the glass hardens. If it spikes, it bubbles. Benyon sighed. I'm the heir to Winterfell, well, second in line now, and I'm a bellows boy. It builds character, Ned promised. And deltoids. Del what? Shoulder muscles. Trust me. Dash. The morning of the third day was crisp and clear. The materials were ready. Roderick had found the sand fine, white silica from a river bend. The seaweed ash was grey and pungent. The limestone dust was chalky. Mikan had delivered the tools. The blowpipes were rough but straight. The casting table was a slab of dark iron, heavy and smooth. Ned stood before the furnace. He wore a heavy leather apron over his tunic, thick gloves. Roderick and Benyon stood by the bellows, looking skeptical. Light it, Ned ordered. They pumped. The coal inside the furnace caught. The fire roared. Ned waited. The temperature gauges in his head were silent, but he knew the color of heat. Cherry red was 700 degrees. Orange was 1000. He needed yellow-white. Harder! Ned shouted over the roar of the flames. We need white heat. Benyon and Roderick grunted, heaving on the lever. The bellows wheezed and blasted air into the heart of the fire. Ned adjusted the intake dampers at the base of the furnace. He had designed them to create a Venturi effect, accelerating the air as it entered the combustion chamber. More oxygen. More heat. Inside the furnace, the crucible, a clay pot filled with the sand mixture, was glowing brighter and brighter. Gods! Roderick yelled, shielding his face. It's like the 7 hells in there. Keep pumping. Ned commanded. Don't lose the rhythm. He watched the crucible through a small mica observation port. The mixture was clumping, then slumping. The flux, the soda ash, was doing its work, attacking the silica structure, lowering the melting point. The solid became liquid. It surrendered to the chemistry. Ready, Ned whispered. He grabbed the long iron blowpipe. He thrust the tip into the glory hole of the furnace, dipping it into the crucible. He twisted it, gathering a glob of molten glass, a glowing, honey-like blob of pure light. He pulled it out. "Move!" Ned shouted. He turned to the casting table. He didn't try to blow it, that required skill he hadn't practiced yet. He was going for cast glass. He held the pipe over the iron table. The glob of glass dripped, heavy and viscous. Ned used his own strength to stabilize his hand. The weight at the end of the 5-foot pole was significant, but his muscles were hard as iron. He let the glass fall onto the table. It hit with a soft slap, spreading out like glowing syrup. "Roller!" Ned barked. He grabbed a heavy iron cylinder Mikan had made. He rolled it over the molten puddle, flattening it out. The heat radiating from the glass was intense. Ned's face felt like it was sunburned instantly. He rolled it flat. A sheet of glowing orange glass, maybe a foot wide and 2 feet long. "Now the lair," Ned said, sweating profusely. He slid a broad, flat iron peel under the sheet. It was heavy, liable to deform if he wasn't careful. He balanced it, keeping his hands steady, fighting the urge to rush. He moved it quickly to the second oven, the annealing lair. This one was cooler, fed by the hot springs and a small coal fire. It would cool the glass down slowly over days, preventing it from shattering due to thermal shock. He slid the sheet inside and closed the door. Ned slumped against the wall. He was drenched in sweat, his hands shaking from physical exertion. Benyon and Roderick stopped pumping. They stared at the annealing oven. What was that?" Benyon asked, breathless. "It looked like trapped sunlight." "That," Ned said, grinning fiercely, "is a window, Ben. A window that will let us grow summer in the middle of winter." They didn't stop with one. Once the process was proven, Ned refined it. He directed Roderick on the exact rhythm of the bellows. He showed Benyon how to mix the batch, the ingredients, to reduce bubbles. He made 6 sheets that day. By the afternoon, Mikan had come down from the smithy to watch. The blacksmith stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching Ned handle the molten material. "It's like metal," Mikan rumbled, stepping closer as Ned gathered a new glob. "But it doesn't forge. It flows. It's a liquid that forgot how to freeze," Ned explained, spinning the pipe to keep the glob centered. "You need a mold, my lord," Mikan critiqued, his craftsman's eye taking over. "Rolling it by hand, it's uneven. If I make you a frame, an iron frame on the table, you can pour it in. Like casting an ingot." Ned looked at the smith. "A frame? Yes. That would give us uniform thickness." "I'll make it," Mikan said, turning away. "And longer tongs. You're going to burn your fingers off with those short ones." Ned smiled. The Industrial Revolution wasn't a solo act. It was contagious. 3 days later, the annealing oven was cool enough to open. Ned gathered his small council of industrialists: Benyon, Roderick, Mikan. Even Ashura came, holding Cregan, curious about what her husband had been doing in the mud for 3 days. She wasn't alone. Elia Martel walked beside her, looking elegant even in northern wool, holding the hand of her daughter. Arthur Dane stood watchfully at the edge of the courtyard, his grey cloak blending with the stone. Ned opened the lair. He reached in and pulled out the first sheet. It wasn't perfect. It was greenish in color, due to the iron impurities in the sand, and it had a few bubbles. The surface was pebbled from the casting table. It wasn't the clear, invisible glass of the modern world. But compared to the cloudy, thick, yellow mica or the expensive, small panes from Myrish lenses, it was a miracle. It was a solid, relatively clear pane of glass, 2 feet by 1 foot. Ned held it up to the sun. The light streamed through it, turning the ground green. "By the gods," Roderick whispered. You can see through it. Clearly. "Imagine a roof made of this," Ned said, looking through the pane at his family. Imagine 100 acres of this, trapping the heat of the springs and the light of the sun. We could grow corn in December. We could have fresh apples in the wolf's wood. Ashura walked forward. She touched the cool surface of the glass. It's beautiful, Ned, she said. It's like ice that doesn't melt. It is clearer than the glass in Sun's pear, Elia noted, her dark eyes reflecting the green light. And thicker. Cregan squirmed out of Ashura's arms and toddled over to the glass. He slapped it with a sticky hand. Thwack! Rennis giggled, breaking away from Elia to join him. She was now 3 years old, steady on her feet, and full of curiosity. She patted the glass too, mimicking the younger boy. Shiny! Rennis declared, her voice bright. Cregan, delighted by the reinforcement, bent down and picked up a smooth pebble, offering it to the princess with a babbling drool. Rennis took the rock solemnly. For me, she asked, her voice clear and articulate compared to Cregan's toddler speak. B.A. Cregan confirmed. Rennis inspected the rock as if it were a gemstone, before beaming at her cousin. Thank you, Cregan. Arthur Dane watched the children play, a faint smile touching his lips. Strong, too, Ned laughed, looking at the handprints on his glass. He handed the pane to Mycon. The smith inspected it, looking for flaws, tapping it with a fingernail. It's good work, my lord, Mycon admitted grudgingly. For cook's sand. We need more, Ned said, his mind already racing to the next step. We need bigger furnaces. We need a team. Roderick, take the glass to White Harbor. Show Lord Manderley. Tell him I need sand. Barges of it. And I need men who aren't afraid of fire. I'll go myself, Roderick promised. When he sees this, he'll empty the river for you. Ned looked at Benyon. And you, Ben? You're my foreman. You know the mix. You know the heat. I need you to train the small folk. We're building a glassworks. Benyon looked at the furnace, then at the glass. He grinned. It was the first time he had looked truly excited about his duties since the war. I'm in. Chapter 31, Fire and Ice. The castle of Winterfell settled into the deep, heavy silence of the wolf hour. The feasts were done, the servants had retired to their pallets, and the only sound was the wind howling against the granite walls, a lonely, mournful song that had sung the Starks to sleep for 8,000 years. Ned Stark walked the corridors of the great keep. His boots were soft leather tonight, making no sound on the stone. He had scrubbed the soot of the glass furnace from his skin, though the smell of wood smoke and ozone still seemed to cling to him, a reminder of the industry that was slowly waking the north. He felt tired. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of the war, nor the frantic drain of using the force to heal, but the good, heavy weariness of a man who has built something. He reached the heavy oak door of the nursery. This was the heart of the castle now. Not the great hall, not the crypts, but this room where the future slept. The room was warm, heated by the vents from the hot springs that ran through the walls. A single tallow candle burned in a niche, casting long, wavering shadows. There were 2 cribs. In the first, Cregan Stark slept like a starfish, limbs sprawled in every direction, blanket kicked off. He was snoring softly, a tiny, rhythmic rumble that sounded like a bear cub. Ned smiled. His heir. The boy who would one day rule this land. In the second crib, usually, lay John. But the second crib was empty. Ned didn't panic. He sensed the life in the room. He turned his gaze to the rocking chair in the corner, hidden in the shadows of the heavy velvet drapes. Lyanna was there. She was dressed in a simple nightgown of white wool, her dyed red hair loose around her shoulders. She was curled up in the large chair, her feet tucked under her. And in her arms, pressed against her chest, was John. She wasn't rocking him. She was just holding him. Her cheek was resting on the top of his head, her eyes closed. She looked peaceful in a way she never did during the day. Ned watched them. He felt the bond between them in the force a bright, silver cord of love that was stronger than any chain. John was asleep, his tiny hand gripping the fabric of Lyanna's gown. She risks so much just to hold him, Ned thought. If a servant walked in, if a guest lost their way. But she didn't care. For these few hours in the night, the lie didn't exist. There was no rigor, no Robert, no rebellion. Just a mother and her son. Ned felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to go to her, to kiss her forehead, to tell her she was safe. But he knew that would break the spell. This was her moment. Her stolen time. He smiled, a sad, soft expression that no one saw. He backed out of the room, using the force to close the door as silently as a ghost. The walk to his own chambers felt lighter. The sight of Lyanna and John had settled something in his chest. The pack was safe. The pack was together. He opened the door. The room was bathed in the warm glow of the hearth fire. The massive bed, draped in furs, dominated the center of the room. But Ned's eyes went immediately to the vanity table near the window. Ashura was there. She was sitting on a cushioned stool, facing a large bronze mirror. She wore a nightgown of sheer violet silk, something she must have brought from Starfall, for no northern loom wove fabric that fine or that revealing. It clung to her like water, shimmering in the firelight. She was brushing her hair. Long, dark strokes, the brush moving rhythmically through the midnight cascade that fell down her back. Ned stood by the door for a moment, just watching her. She was breathtaking. Even after the war, after the birth, after the journey to this frozen end of the world, she shone. The contrast between her delicate, southern beauty and the rough, heavy stone of Winterfell was striking. She was a flower blooming in a fortress. Ashura paused, the brush mid-stroke. Her eyes flicked to the mirror, catching his reflection in the doorway. "You're staring, my lord," she said, her voice a low, teasing hum. "I'm admiring the view," Ned replied, closing the door and locking it. "It's better than the glass furnace." "I should hope so," Ashura laughed softly. "That furnace smells of ash. You smell like pine. And snow. And sweat?" Ned asked, walking toward her. "A little," she admitted, watching him approach in the glass. "But it's honest sweat. The sweat of a man who builds." Ned reached her. He stood behind the stool, looking down at her reflection. Their eyes met in the bronze. Her violet gaze was dark, dilated in the dim light. "Give me that," Ned whispered. He reached down and gently took the brush from her hand. His fingers brushed her calloused skin against silk-soft palms. Ashura surrendered the brush with a small smile. She leaned back slightly, offering her hair to him. Ned began to brush. He was careful. His hands, which could crush a man's throat or wield a great sword with terrifying speed, moved with infinite tenderness. He started at the ends, working out the small tangles, then moved up to the scalp. Stroke. 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 The silence in the room was intimate, heavy with unsaid things. "You were with the children?" Ashura asked, her voice sleepy and relaxed under the rhythm of the brush. "I was," Ned said. "Cregan is sleeping like a log. He's taken over the entire crib." "He gets that from you," Ashura teased. "You sprawl." "I do not sprawl," Ned protested lightly, gathering her hair in one hand to brush the underside. "I occupy strategic territory." Is that what you call taking all the blankets?" "That is resource management. The north is cold." "It is," Ashura agreed. She shivered slightly, though the room was warm. "But you keep me warm." Ned set the brush down on the table. He rested his hands on her shoulders. Her skin was warm, smooth as the glass he had made that morning. He let his thumbs trace the line of her collarbone, feeling the pulse beat steadily at the base of her throat. You are tense, Ned murmured. It's the cold, she said, leaning her head back against his stomach. It gets into the bones. Even with the fires. Then we'll have to find other ways to warm you up, Ned said. He bent down. He kissed the sensitive spot just below her ear. Ashura gasped softly. Her head tilted to the side, giving him access. Ned kissed her neck. Slow, deliberate kisses. He tasted the jasmine oil she used, the salt of her skin. He let his lips trail down the column of her throat, finding the pulse point. Ned, she breathed, her hands coming up to cover his on her shoulders. You smell of dawn, Ned whispered against her skin. Of summer. And you have cold lips, she teased, though her voice was breathless. Winter is coming. Winter is here, Ned corrected. He nipped lightly at the junction of her neck and shoulder. But the wolf has a thick coat. Ashura turned in the stool. She spun around to face him, her silk gown shifting, revealing the curve of her legs through the fabric. She looked up at him, her eyes playful and hungry. Is that all the wolf has? She asked, arching an eyebrow. A coat. Ned grinned. It was the smile he reserved only for her, the smile that melted the ice of his public persona. The wolf has teeth, Ned warned. He leaned down and captured her lips. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was deep, possessive. It tasted of wine and longing. Ashura responded instantly, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Her mouth opened to him, hot and welcoming. Ned groaned low in his throat. The softness of her lips, the heat of her body, the scent of her desire. It was intoxicating. He broke the kiss, pulling back just an inch. Their foreheads rested together. You represent a serious distraction to my ruling, Lady Stark, Ned murmured. Good, Ashura whispered, tracing the line of his jaw with her thumb. The north can wait until morning. Tonight you belong to the south. Ned looked down at her. The silk gown had slipped slightly off one shoulder. He ran his hand down her arm, marveling at the contrast between his rough hand and her pale skin. This gown, Ned said, hooking a finger under the strap. It's very thin. It's Dornish silk, Ashura said, her eyes darkening. It breathes. It hides nothing, Ned corrected. His gaze dropped, sweeping over her body. The silk left little to the imagination. He could see the curve of her breasts, the nip of her waist, the swell of her hips. I can see every curve. Ashura smirked. Do you approve of the architecture, Lord Builder? I think I need to inspect the foundation, Ned growled. He didn't give her time to respond. He bent down and swept her up into his arms. Ashura squealed, a delighted sound, wrapping her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck. Ned, she laughed. I can walk. Not tonight, Ned said. Tonight, you fly. He carried her across the room. He didn't drop her, he wasn't reckless. He walked to the massive four-poster bed and tossed her onto the furs. Ashura landed with a bounce, laughing, her hair fanning out like a dark halo across the white wolf pelts. The violet silk rode up her thighs, exposing long, slender legs. She looked up at him, her laughter fading into a sultry smile. She propped herself up on her elbows. Well, she challenged. Are you going to stand there and stare, or are you going to join me? Ned unbuckled his belt. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. I'm thinking, Ned teased, unlacing his tunic. I have a lot of paperwork. The glass gardens, the letter to the wall. Ashura narrowed her eyes playfully. She slowly, deliberately, lowered one strap of her gown, revealing the creamy slope of her shoulder. Paperwork? She asked innocently. Ned kicked his boots off. The paperwork can burn. He pounced. He landed on the bed, hovering over her, supporting his weight on his arms so he didn't crush her. Ashura gasped, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the hard muscle beneath his shirt. "You're heavy," she whispered, though she pulled him down. "I'm grounded," Ned said. He nuzzled her nose with his. "Solid." "You're a brute," she countered, running her hands down his back. "I'm a Stark," Ned said. "We're wildlings at heart." He kissed her again, deeper this time. He let his weight settle onto her, pressing her into the mattress. He felt every inch of her against him, soft where he was hard, yielding where he was firm. His hand moved down her side, tracing the curve of her hip through the silk. He kneaded the flesh gently. "You've lost weight," he murmured against her mouth. "Since the birth. Is that a complaint?" Ashura asked breathlessly. "An observation," Ned said. His hand moved lower, finding the hem of the gown. His fingers brushed the bare skin of her thigh. "I liked you round. I like you slender. I just like you." He trailed his fingers up her inner thigh. Ashura shivered, her head falling back into the pillows. "Ned! Tell me to stop," he whispered, biting lightly at her collarbone. "Don't you dare," she hissed. Ned smiled against her skin. He sat up, straddling her hips. He looked down at her. Her face was flushed, her lips swollen, her eyes hazy with lust. She was the mother of his son, the lady of his castle, and the desire of his life. "You know," Ned said, his voice rough. "They say Dornish women are fire." "They are," Ashura agreed, reaching up to undo the laces of his shirt. Her fingers were nimble, eager. "And they say northern men are ice," Ned continued, letting her strip the shirt from his shoulders. He tossed it aside, revealing a chest scarred by war but built by labor. "Ice melts," Ashura whispered, running her palms over his chest, "when you get it hot enough." "Or," Ned said, leaning down until his lips were an inch from hers. "Fire consumes. And ice preserves. Maybe I'm just here to make sure you last forever." Ashura laughed, a throaty sound. "That was terrible poetry, Ned." "I'm a lord, not a bard," Ned grinned. "Then stop talking," Ashura commanded. She pulled his head down. "And show me that Stark stamina." Ned obliged. He kissed her, his hands exploring her body with a reverence and a hunger that made Ashura gasp. He teased the strap of her gown down her arm, pressing kisses to the exposed skin. He teased the curve of her breast, circling but not touching, until she arched her back, demanding more. "Please," she whimpered. "Patience," Ned murmured. "Winter is long. We have all night." He moved his hand up her leg again, slow and deliberate. He felt the heat radiating from her. "You are burning up," Ned noted. "You did this," she accused. "I did," Ned agreed. He pulled the gown up, exposing her to the firelight. He looked at her body, the soft curve of her belly, the wideness of her hips, the beauty of the woman who had carried his child. "Perfect," Ned whispered. Ashura blushed, trying to cover herself. "I have marks." "From Cregan." Ned gently pulled her hands away. He kissed the faint stretch marks on her hip. "Battle scars," Ned said fiercely. "Proof of life. They are silver. Like your house." He moved over her, his eyes locking with hers. The teasing was done. The playfulness faded into a raw, intense need. "Ashura," he said. "Ned," she replied. He entered her. It wasn't fast or frantic. It was a slow, deep joining. A claiming. Ashura cried out, digging her nails into his shoulders. Ned groaned, burying his face in her neck, overwhelmed by the sensation of home. They moved together in the firelight, the rhythm of the bed creaking in time with the wind outside. Fire and ice, south and north, binding themselves together in the dark. For a long time, there were only soft sounds, gasps, whispers, the friction of skin on skin. Much later, the fire had burned down to embers. Ned lay on his back, Ashura curled against his side, her head on his chest. He played with a strand of her hair, wrapping it around his finger. She was tracing patterns on his chest with her index finger. "You weren't kidding," she murmured sleepily. "About what?" Ned asked, his voice a deep rumble in his chest. "The stamina," she said. She propped herself up on her chin to look at him. "Did you learn that from a book too? Like your glass gardens?" Ned chuckled. "Some things can't be learned from books, my lady. Some things are just stark endurance." "Well," Ashura yawned, settling back down. "I approve of stark endurance. We should utilize it often." "I intend to," Ned promised. He pulled the furs up over them, cocooning them against the chill of the room. "Ned. Are we going to be okay?" she asked quietly. "With the lies? With the secrets?" Ned tightened his arm around her. He thought of Lyanna in the nursery. He thought of John and Cregan. He thought of the letter he had sent to the wall. "We will be more than okay," Ned said. "We will be strong. The North is hard, Ash. But it protects its own. As long as we are together, nothing can touch us." "The pack," she whispered. "The pack," Ned agreed. He kissed the top of her head. "Sleep now, my star. Tomorrow, we have work to do." "Tomorrow," she mumbled, already drifting off. Ned lay awake for a while longer, listening to the wind. He felt the force settling around the castle, a protective blanket woven from his own wool and the ancient magic of the stones. He was the Lord of Winterfell. He was a husband. He was a father. And for the first time in his 2 lives, Ned Stark felt completely, perfectly content. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. Chapter 32, The Flow of the River. The morning air in Winterfell was crisp enough to freeze breath in the lungs, but in the training yard, the heat of exertion kept the cold at bay. Ned walked out of the great keep, pausing on the steps to watch. The yard was busy. Guards were running drills, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of wooden practice swords against shields creating a steady heartbeat for the castle. In the center ring, drawing the eyes of every off-duty soldier and servant, were 2 figures. One was Benyon Stark. At 14, he was lanky, growing into his limbs, moving with the eager, frantic energy of a puppy who hadn't yet realized how big his paws were. He wielded a castle-forged longsword with 2 hands, hacking and slashing with more enthusiasm than form. The other was Arthur Dane. The Sword of the Morning wore simple boiled leather and a grey cloak, but he moved like a king in silk. He held 2 practice swords weighted wood and he used them with a casual, devastating grace. He wasn't trying to win, he was teaching. He parried Benyon's heavy overhand chop with a flick of his left wrist, stepped inside the guard, and tapped Benyon's ribs with the sword in his right hand. "Dead," Arthur said calmly. Benyon groaned, stepping back and rubbing his side. "You're too fast." "You are too committed," Arthur corrected, resetting his stance. "You swing that sword as if the weight of the world is behind it. It makes you slow. It makes you predictable. Don't fight the sword, Benyon. Guide it." Benyon gritted his teeth and charged again. This time, he feinted low and swung high. It was a good move for a boy. Arthur didn't even blink. He caught the high swing on his cross guard, spun, and swept Benyon's legs out from under him with the flat of his other blade. Benyon hit the mud with a splat. "Dead again," Arthur noted. "I hate you," Benyon wheezed, staring up at the grey sky. "Get up," Arthur said, extending a hand. "The wall won't care if you're tired. The wildlings won't care if the mud is cold." Ned smiled, walking down the steps. "He's right, Ben. Although I think he's enjoying knocking you down a bit too much." Arthur turned, a genuine smile breaking his stoic mask. "Lord Stark. Your brother has spirit." But he fights like an umber. All fury, no flow. Benyon took Arthur's hand and hauled himself up, wiping mud from his face. Ned. Did you see? I almost had him on the feint. I saw you land on your back, Ned pointed out dryly. But the footwork was better. Arthur looked at Ned. There was a glint in his violet eyes, a challenge. Since the Tower of Joy, the warrior in him, the perfectionist who had spent a lifetime mastering the blade, was itching to fight again and understand how he lost. You're dressed for the yard, my lord, Arthur observed, noting Ned's padded doublet and training trousers. I need to keep my hand in, Ned said, rolling his shoulders. Ruling is mostly sitting in chairs and reading ledgers. It makes a man stiff. Arthur tossed one of his wooden swords to a squire and walked over to the rack. He picked up 2 fresh wasters, heavier ones, weighted with lead cores. Care for a dance? Arthur asked. The yard went quiet. The guards stopped their drills. Even Roderick Castle paused his inspection of the archers. A spar between the Lord of Winterfell and the Sword of the Morning was not something you saw every day. Ned looked at the wooden swords. He looked at Arthur. Why not? Ned said. He grabbed a single hand and a half-waster from the rack. They circled each other in the mud. Arthur held his dual blades low, relaxed. He was the perfect predator. Ned held his sword in a standard high guard, but his stance was different. Grounded. Still. Come, Ned said. Arthur attacked. It wasn't the playful tapping he had used on Benyon. It was a whirlwind. Arthur launched a flurry of strikes high, low, left, right, testing Ned's defense, looking for a crack. Ned didn't give him one. Ned felt the air displacement of the wooden blades before they arrived. He parried efficiently, moving just enough to deflect the energy, never wasting motion. Clack! Clack! Clack clack clack! The sound of wood on wood was a staccato rhythm, faster than a heartbeat. Arthur pressed the advantage. He spun, bringing both swords down in a scissor cut. Ned stepped through the attack, jamming his hilt into Arthur's chest to shove him back. Arthur stumbled but recovered instantly, laughing. Good. You're awake. I try to be, Ned grinned. He watched Arthur. He saw the potential in the man. Arthur Dane was already at the peak of human conditioning. His reflexes were honed by decades of practice. But he was limited by his senses, by the speed of thought. He can do more, Ned thought. He just needs to stop thinking. Again, Ned commanded. Arthur charged. As they fought, Ned reached out with his mind. He didn't use the force to push Arthur or slow him down. He used it to nudge. He touched Arthur's consciousness. It was a bright, sharp thing, like a diamond. But it was rigid. It was calculating angles, speed, fatigue. Let go, Ned projected the thought, not as words, but as a feeling. Stop planning. Just be. Don't think, Arthur, Ned said aloud, parrying a thrust. Your mind is too slow. Your body knows what to do. Let it flow. Arthur frowned, confused, but he redoubled his efforts. He attacked faster. Ned stepped up the pressure. He began to attack back, forcing Arthur to defend. Ned's strikes were impossibly fast, coming from angles that shouldn't have worked. Flow, Ned urged, his voice dropping into a rhythmic cadence. Like the river. Don't fight the current. Be the current. Arthur was sweating. He was trying to track Ned's blade, trying to anticipate. Let go. Ned pushed a wave of calm into Arthur's mind. A suggestion of tranquility in the midst of chaos. Something clicked. Arthur's eyes glazed over slightly. The furrow in his brow smoothed out. He stopped trying to track Ned's sword and simply moved. His left hand parried a strike he hadn't even seen. His right hand lashed out in a counter-strike that Ned actually had to dodge. The rhythm changed. Arthur wasn't fighting anymore, he was dancing. His swords became a blur of motion, a seamless wall of defense and offense. He was moving faster than he ever had in his life. He was tapping into the force, not wielding it, but letting it flow through him. A conduit. Benyon watched, mouth agape. By the gods! Ned smiled. He parried a strike that would have taken his ear off. He ducked a decapitating swing. Arthur was magnificent. He was a storm of wood and intent. For a full minute, they fought at a level that no one in the yard could comprehend. It was a blur of motion, a symphony of violence. But the human body has limits. Arthur wasn't conditioned for the channel. The strain of the flow began to tax his muscles. His breathing grew ragged. Enough, Ned decided. He sensed the dip in Arthur's energy. Ned stepped in. He caught Arthur's right-hand blade on his cross-guard, twisted to lock it, and used his free hand to grab Arthur's left wrist. He wrenched the sword from Arthur's grip. With a sweep of his leg, he knocked Arthur's feet out from under him. Arthur hit the mud. He lay there for a second, staring at the grey sky. Then he blinked, the trance breaking. He sat up, shaking his head as if waking from a deep sleep. He looked at his hands. He looked at Ned. What? Arthur gasped. What was that? That, Ned said, offering him a hand up, was you. Getting out of your own way. Arthur took the hand. He was trembling slightly. I felt. I didn't see you. I just knew where you were. I felt the wind on the blade. It was like I wasn't there. Mushin, Ned whispered the earth term, then corrected himself. The empty mind. He looked around the yard. The soldiers were staring in awe. Show's over. Ned barked. Back to work. The enemies won't wait for you to gawk. The yard sprang back to activity, though the whispers continued. Ned turned to Benyon and Arthur. Come with me. He walked toward the gate leading to the God's Wood. As he passed a stack of hay bales near the armory, he stopped. He didn't look, but he sensed a familiar, fiery signature hiding behind them. You too, Anna, Ned called out. You can stop hiding. I know you were watching. There was a rustle of straw. A moment later, a woman with auburn hair stepped out. She wore simple woolen clothes, her new identity wrapped around her like armor. I was just checking on Benyon, Anna lied, crossing her arms. You were studying the footwork, Ned corrected. Come on. Dash. The God's Wood of Winterfell was a place out of time. The noise of the castle faded as soon as they passed the gate, replaced by the hushed whisper of the wind in the sentinel trees and the murmur of the hot springs. Ned led them to the heart tree. The weirwood's face was weeping red sap, its eyes watching them with ancient, silent judgment. He motioned for them to sit on the mossy roots. Arthur looked uncomfortable. He was a man of the Seven, a knight of the South. This was a pagan place to him. But he sat. Benyon and Anna sat cross-legged, looking at their brother with expectation. What happened in the yard? Arthur asked again. That speed, it wasn't natural. It was natural, Ned said, leaning against the white trunk of the tree. It was the most natural thing in the world. It is the energy that binds everything together. He looked at them. The maesters call it magic and dismiss it. The septons call it heresy. The first men, our ancestors, they called it the breath of the old gods. Ned held out his hand. He focused. A layer of snow near Arthur's boot twitched. Then, it rose. A perfect sphere of compressed snow floated into the air, hovering at eye level. Arthur flinched. Benyon's eyes widened. Anna leaned forward, fascinated. I call it the force, Ned said. It is in the trees. The rocks. The water. It is in you. Magic, Benyon whispered. Like the children of the forest. Similar, Ned agreed. The children sang to the earth. The green seers look through time. What I do, what I did at the tower, Arthur, it is tapping into that same river. I can guide it. I can strengthen my limbs with it. I can heal flesh. He looked at Arthur. You felt it today. In the yard. You let the river take you. It felt. Arthur struggled for the word. Clear. Perfect. Can we learn it? Anna asked, her voice hungry. She had always wanted to be more than a lady in a castle. She wanted to be a warrior. You can, Ned said. But it is not like learning to swing a sword. It is not muscle memory. It is will. He paused, considering how to explain the limitations. The mind is a door, Ned said. When we are children, the door is open. We see the world as it is full of wonder and connection. As we grow, we close the door. We learn rules. We learn limits. We learn impossible. He looked at Arthur. You are the greatest knight who ever lived, Arthur. But your mind is set. You are rigid. Your door is closed and barred by years of discipline and duty. You felt it today because I pushed the door open for you, but to do it yourself, it will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Arthur looked at his hands. I am too old. Not too old, Ned said. Just, too finished. A clay pot that has already been fired is hard to reshape without breaking. He turned to Benyon. Benyon is young. His mind is still soft clay. He can learn. And me? Anna asked. You are a Stark, Ned said. The blood of the first men is strong in you. The wolf blood. It is wild, chaotic energy. You have the potential, Anna. But you lack control. So teach us, Benyon said, bouncing on his heels. I will try, Ned said. Let's see what you have. He moved to Benyon first. Close your eyes, Ben. Breathe. Listen to the wind. Don't hear it with your ears. Feel it on your skin. Feel the life in the tree behind you. Benyon closed his eyes. He screwed up his face in concentration. Don't force it, Ned chided gently. Relax. Ned placed his hand on Benyon's shoulder. He sent a small pulse of force energy into his brother. A gentle probe, looking for the reservoir of power within the boy. He found it immediately. But it didn't flow. It sat there, heavy and dense. It was like touching a glacier. Cold, solid, immovable. When Ned pushed, the energy didn't yield, it fortified. It was an instinctual defense, a wall of spiritual ice slamming down. Ned's hand wasn't just stopped, it was physically shoved off Benyon's shoulder by an invisible wave of pressure. Benyon's eyes snapped open. Whoa! What was that? Arthur stared. He didn't move. But your hand. His spirit pushed back, Ned said, smiling. Like a wall of ice. You are a guardian, Ben. He moved to Anna. Your turn. Anna closed her eyes. She didn't need to be told to relax. She fell into a stillness that reminded Ned of the wolf waiting to pounce. He touched her shoulder. He sent the pulse. It was chaos. It wasn't the solid wall of Benyon, it was a thunderstorm. Her energy swirled around his probe, chaotic, hot, and jagged. It felt sharp. It felt like lightning looking for a ground. Snap! Ned felt a static shock against his palm. His hand was thrown back, his fingers tingling as if he'd touched a live wire. Ouch, Ned muttered, rubbing his hand. Anna opened her eyes, grinning. Did I do that? You have the spark, Ned confirmed. You are the storm, Anna. Wild. Untamed. But powerful. You will be a striker. He turned finally to Arthur. Sir Arthur. Arthur closed his eyes. He sat perfectly still, his breathing controlled. He was a master of meditation, in the martial sense. Ned touched his shoulder. He sent the pulse. He felt Arthur's energy. It wasn't ice, and it wasn't a storm. It was light. It was orderly, structured, and precise. Like a fortress of white stone. It didn't fight back immediately. It analyzed the intrusion, categorized it, and then deflected it. It was a gentle, firm resistance. Ned's hand wasn't thrown off, it was simply slid away, as if he had tried to push against a greased shield. Different, Ned mused. Bad? Arthur asked, opening his eyes. No, Ned said. Controlled. Your connection is quiet, constant. It isn't the roaring river of the Starks. It is clarity. You will master the flow. Ned stood up and walked to the center of the circle. This is where we start, Ned said. Every morning, before the sun rises, we meet here. We meditate. We learn to feel the world. And then we learn to throw rocks. Benyon asked eagerly. Then you learn to lift a pebble, Ned corrected. Without touching it. If you can lift a pebble, you can lift a mountain. The principle is the same. Close your eyes, Ned commanded. The three of them obeyed. Reach out, Ned guided. Don't look inward. Look out. Feel the heat of the springs under the earth. Feel the cold of the snow. Feel the heartbeat of the raven in the branches above. He walked among them, his voice a low drone, guiding them into the first steps of a larger world. You are not your body, Ned recited, translating the Jedi code into Westerosi thought. You are the light. You are the connection. The flesh is just a vessel. Benyon frowned, struggling. Anna swayed slightly, caught in the rhythm. Arthur sat like stone. Ned watched them. It will take time, he thought. Years. But if I can train them, if I can build a circle of Force users in the north. He imagined Benyon on the wall, sensing wildlings miles away. He imagined Anna, defending her son with a blade that moved faster than sight. He imagined Arthur, the sword of the morning, wielding dawn with the power of a Jedi master. It was a dangerous path. The Citadel would burn them for witches. The Faith would call them demons. But the Night King wouldn't care about their titles. Ned sat down and joined them in the meditation. The wind rustled the leaves of the weirwood. The red face seemed to smile. The wolf pack was evolving. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.